Friends.
All right, thank you for everybody for coming. I'm here with Ed. Just met him like about 2-3 weeks ago on X. Produces a lot of material on the Tridactyls, very in-depth information that if you're looking for sources, that's basically the place you want to go to. I appreciate you coming here and speaking with me today. Where can everybody find you? First of all, let's just start there. Where can everybody find you, and tell them about yourself a little bit?
So I am on most of the major social media sites at Tridactyls. I was an early adopter of the name, so that gave me the luxury of getting YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, X. Didn't get Instagram because some kid already had a Yoda fan club there. Called Tridactyls. Speaking of fan clubs, I see you have Batman in the background. I should mention that I'm friends. I helped brought attention to Bill Finger's plight. I don't know if you know who Bill Finger is. He's the true creator of Batman, and I became friends with the heiress of the Batman name, if you will, the Batman creation, Athena Finger. So I just thought I'd throw that in there since we saw the Batman back there. Yeah, so I'm on those, and I'm also at Tridactyls.com, which is my modest little website. Use it mostly to host my papers. So if anybody wants to read about my cultural assertions or even my biological hypotheses, those are there at Tridactyls.com. There I am giving a lecture at a local theater. I have that slideshow loaded also if anybody wants to look at that today.
oh yeah. I was looking at all this stuff I want to say like the last 2-3 weeks since we met, because like what I like to do is I like to do a deep dive into people when I see something interesting, especially when something's talked about a lot. You get somebody who's doing their due diligence, somebody's going in doing their hardcore detective type research. That's why Batman is my favorite character, because he's supposed to be the greatest detective out there. So when you're being the greatest detective out there, you're going to go through every single rabbit hole until you can weed out what is right and what is wrong. And that is one of the reasons why Batman's always around me, because I have Batman stuff everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to get Athena Finger on your show sometime.
Oh, that would be awesome. So it's interesting. So I have to ask you this. So of course, not everybody agrees what they are. Okay, well,
right.
We won't even argue with that. But when it comes up to these species, or what anybody would like to call them to make them feel good, right? Are they considered humans in your eyes? Like, would be like the type of human species or the beginning, or what is it that is so interesting about them that we have to research that these?
Well, they're definitely not fully human. And we have to keep in mind when we're talking about the Tridactyls that there is a varying degree of Homo primate admixture in the various, what they're calling different species. But when you say different species, some people may think bear versus dog, but it's more like black bear versus brown bear as far as species go. So really, I suggest they're all part of the same genus. And, one of the clues is the 3 fingers. So there are the smaller ones, which were given the name insectoid, although limited insect-like features. So that name's a bit of a misnomer. And then there's the smaller ones, which they've given the name reptilian. And in my research, that's actually also incorrect, because a better term would be amphibian. And there would be the larger ones that get a lot of attention that have names like Maria and Montserrat, which have lots of human features to them, but also a lot of things that aren't quite human.
That's because that's one of the questions that I have, is what is considered human. Right now, yes, me and you and everybody on this planet that looks like us right now are considered humans, but what came before us, and what could have they possibly been? And if the oxygen levels were different and certain things in the atmosphere was different at that time, of course, we would look different. And then as things changed, we changed with it. So it's interesting that, you know, they of course they walked bilaterally. They walked on both legs, right?
Well,
Right. Or were
that
they
may have
legs
been
that
facultative bipedalism. That is part-time. Because
part-time?
also part of my research is since they are amphibian, I've detected what I believe is four-limb first metamorphosis that you might find in an axolotl salamander. So when you measure I haven't measured all of them, but when you look at the measurements for Josephina, that one of the so-called reptilians, or they'll call her the J type because she's sort of the holotype, sort of the official specimen at this stage is Josephina. She's the official prime specimen. The measurements suggest that the arm length is longer than the rear legs.
I actually read that that's usually the case with elongated heads. If they have elongated heads, those limbs,
their front limbs are longer. Interesting.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. I actually read that somewhere. I can't remember where exactly, but I definitely read that somewhere.
Yeah, I'm making a note right now.
Yeah. I think I posted it one time. I'll have to go through my. Yeah, I'm always you see all. If you ever look at my X account, all I do is just post books, and then if I find something interesting in there, I'll quote it, and then I'll do some research on it, and I'll do a commentary on it. Okay, this is what I learned, and this is what.
It's kind of what I do in a way, right? Similar.
Yeah. So that's how. I would just have to look through it on my phone. I'm pretty sure I know it because I just posted it not too long ago, and that's I remember that because I was the biggest thing is that, and the other thing is the elongated heads. Also, everybody's so fascinated by the elongated heads. Well, one thing that I found interesting is that, and it's not the elongated heads as the ones with the Tridactyls, but they said that the oldest Homo sapien bones have a type of elongated head too. So yeah, these came from Morocco, Africa, like 300,000 years ago. It's not the same ones, but they definitely say that the oldest bones that they have as Homo sapiens are the ones they found in Morocco, Africa. I know that it's like a 2012 peer-reviewed article that came out that talked about it or something like that.
Interesting. So, yeah, that's another thing I'll have to look into.
Yeah, so that's why that kind of sparked that memory in me about the limbs being longer, and that would be because they would be using all four, though, right?
Right. And again, I suggest the four-limb first development. So if you picture these axolotl or other perhaps salamanders, they're going to be moving around. You know, perhaps even another example could be one of these land-walking fish sort of movements. So heavy into the forelimbs, crawling. And also, you know, there's other features of the smaller ones that indicate that. So that four-limb first development comes with a furcula. I can pull up that particular slide. And there's disagreement among some paleontologists whether it's a furcula or not. But if anything, it's a proto-furcula, meaning I suggest that it predates. Oh, look at that. I see. I have the wrong. I have my own screen up, it looks like. Hold on one second. Yeah, let's take a look at this slide here, if you don't mind.
Yes, let me get this one out of here. Let's get you up on the big screen.
So here's an early, I call these info memes. It was part of, I started this process. I thought I was going to mostly be a sort of a facilitator of information as an educator. But I found that some of the information coming out was lacking. So I ended up diving headfirst into the biology, even though really my jam is really mostly cultural. So the discussion is, and here I use the term proto-interclavicle. So that actually works. Another, you know, my studies are live, if you will. It's going on in real time. So you'll see that I do change terminology. I do update my theories. because everything I'm doing is literally in real time and I'm posting. It's part of this grassroots movement, if you will, to educate people about these beings. So a proto-interclavicle isn't a bad name. Furcula, I still don't think is a bad name. The researchers of South America are using that. People may know the furcula from Thanksgiving. Anytime you take a wishbone and break it in half, which makes me wonder, where did that come from? So another term I'm using is a clavicular arch. So furcula is fine though, but what does that mean exactly? Well, I think partially it has to do with that forelimb first development might be causing that. It's also an indicator of something that is perhaps, well, if it's predating the furcula. Keep in mind that furculas are said to come about maybe hundreds of millions of years ago. So this would be another additional hundreds of millions of years in the past if our assertions are correct.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. You know, I read a lot about how humans came to be. You know, there were stages to it. You know, there's different species, so on and so forth, and everybody seems to say they have a good roundabout answer on how we became Homo sapiens. They just don't know the missing link and stuff like that. And they consider Homo sapiens, intelligent beings. We're intelligent beings, right? Now, with these Tridactyls, with all the information that you know, what kind of intelligence would you rate them as far as for their time period? Not for ours, of course, because every time has its own need for a type of intelligence. So what kind of intelligence do you think they had?
Well, if we're going to base intelligence on cranial size, Maria, one of the larger hybrids, has a suggested 30% larger brain.
Wow.
And when I look at the smaller ones, what might appear as two hemispheres of a brain or two lobes, to me gives the impression of actually two distinct brains. Now, does that mean they're twice as smart as us? Or does that simply mean it's a redundant system to ensure survivability? I see a lot of redundancy in them. For example, what was the other thing? Well, at least bifurcation, dual systems. So my recent research that you just posted, I mean, very recent, I just posted it last night. It was a hypothesis that I was working. These things take time, as you mentioned, Mr. Batman and his detective work. I find that it takes time, almost like learning something new, whether it's maybe a martial art or a musical instrument. So it requires someone to keep looking at these constantly and keep working through what the possibilities are. So on the latest discovery, it appears as though they may have a forked tongue, which would be an interesting impetus for certain myths in humanity, wouldn't it? So anyway, you asked about the brain. So I suggest that the smaller ones like Josephina may actually have dual brains, which could be an invertebrate parallel trait. I've suggested in the past that while they look like a typical animal, they may have some invertebrate traits, which again would push back the origins of these creatures another 100 millions of years or so.
What's the roundabout time that you give for the time?
I'm giving like as far back as 500 million years ago, if not earlier. I've given them a label of Genesis taxon, meaning that these could be ancestral species to other species. Let's go back to that furcula example. So that furcula, again, combined with another trait. Let's just use this trait here. I'm going to share another slide with you here.
All right.
Let's see. Let's go full screen here. I don't know where the easy button is. There's always a quick easy button.
I ain't even gonna lie, that it do be like that. And then when you in the heat of the moment, the button doesn't want to work sometimes. So.
That's right. So here, I'll just go full screen on that. How's that working on your end?
No, it's good. It's good. It's good.
So these are gastralia. These are what some people call stomach ribs or floating ribs. And there's a parallel there in a dinosaur there, it looks like a raptor. Crocodilians have those. So, and it says here, modern birds only have vestiges of this structure. So if we're looking at some of the traits, such as the suspected cutaneous breathing, combined with the tridactyly, the 3 fingers, combined with a furcula and this gastralia stomach ribs, which can be found in modern crocodilians, these traits altogether allude to something, as I mentioned, a Genesis taxon, some sort of ancestral species. Now, a lot of people say, well, couldn't it just be a convergent evolution? That's actually not Occam's razor in this case. That is not the simple answer, that one creature would survive through time, sort of collecting all of these different traits throughout time. To me, the Occam's razor suggests these beings go back hundreds of millions of years, and there's other data sets for that. When you look at the unknown DNA that was sampled, the unknown DNA, if we were to find a known parallel to the unknown DNA, how far back in time would you have to go? And again, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. And this isn't even including the cultural assertions involved with these.
Right. You know, it's interesting, excuse me, that you said DNA, because that's one of the questions a lot of people always argue. What does the DNA say? And it does say unknown DNA, right? But the DNA
says a large, significant amount of unknown DNA that does not correlate with any known modern species.
Yeah. So that right there, until we can get that answer, we have to keep searching until we get that answer, because that's what you're searching for.
And the good news is that 6 specimens are supposed to have their DNA available to us. So that's going to be cool if that's the case, right?
So yeah, so the point is that there's DNA test already on it.
DNA and carbon dating tests. Yes. So it's funny that, you know, one of the other reasons I got into this is that I knew there was going to be a propaganda hit against this, whether intentional by people who are just skeptical. I'm sure you know people. I know plenty of people where you tell them this and they laugh, they scoff. Right?
I know. I already
and so know. I already went into this, and you know, maybe it's a personal thing, but even in my life, you know, when I was way back when I was a young lad, and I was a waiter who wanted to become a bartender, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in that little realm of the world, the bartenders are like, well, you're just a waiter, right? Mm-hmm. And then later on, I became a professional actor. And what did people say? Well, you're just a bartender, mm-hmm. Right? And then I worked at a museum as an archaeologist. Well, you're just an actor. So I know that these personal hits kind of happen to people on a daily basis. So I knew that this was going to be a struggle. And so that's part of what fires me up every morning, is that it's a fight for the truth, and it's a fight against skepticism. And unfortunately, it's also what, again, I use the term hit because it seems like there is deliberate ignorance that's occurring with this phenomenon. So
I know.
It's something I fight against every day.
No, I get it. Like I said, I'm a big history fan, and I go and read books. I mean, just taking 1 minute, you'll see exactly what I like to do. Like, I don't take my opinion. I don't take somebody else's opinion. I just share what I've learned. That's it. I just say, hey, I read this book. This is what I know.
Right.
That's
yeah,
it.
That's funny too. That's funny too. Like if you're the middleman, don't shoot the messenger. Yeah. Even yourself gets shot down. I'm like, man, I'm just telling you what I read. Or even the case of the studies. It's like, I'm just telling you what I found.
Yeah. And if I'm wrong, show me the right way. Because one of the things that I used to do, and this was part of my journey, just through just trying to understand life and not just life and the facts and how to handle things, is that when somebody used to ask me something, I would go tell them, go Google it. And that was the stupidest thing to do. I should have said, hey, hold on, let me give you this, that, and the third. This is the
Okay.
facts. This is the fiction, and this is what this is the book that you should read, or these are the books you should read. Like I literally like if I've done a podcast discussion with Michael Cramo, Forbidden Archaeology, author of Forbidden Archaeology.
Okay.
And one of the questions I asked him, just like I asked you, is what is a human? And he basically, in so many ways, said there's not just one way to identify it. There's so many different ways. But I know in his book, he talks about how human-like species could have went back as far as 60 million years. Now, I'm not sure if he knew about your studies and stuff like that. I can't remember if he wrote about that in the book, but I would have to go back and look, and I'll definitely let you know, because I do have a lot of tabs in there. But I remember the 60 million only because of the fact that that's at least the dinosaur time frame at roundabout. So if your information gives out more information that goes back further than that, that's like how you say you can update your information. That's a good, see, that's one thing that I like. That's what, like when I give somebody a source and say, hey, look, in this book, it does not say that. You said it says it in this book. I read this book and it does not say that. Can you point me in a direction where it says it at? And,
and you compare the data and make your own decision from there.
Yeah, because that's where it leads you to more information. Because two people can read the same book, read the same data, but come up with different ideas of what it is.
Well,
only because
that's happening now with even looking at the bodies. People are, there's going to be, why do people go get a second opinion from a doctor? Because there's going to be a second opinion. And some people are like, I better get a third or fourth opinion on this. Right. Yeah. So I think that's one of the best examples of why you don't just accept one thing. So in that regards, the skeptics are legitimate in that regards, that yes, you should look at other data points, I suggest.
One thing that I noticed about you is especially when you're replying back into your X account, sometimes when somebody says something that asks you a question, you usually go back and just say, hey, look at this data right here, because you have data for almost every question that I've seen somebody ask you. And that's one that I do like about you, is how you what I've noticed especially about you is that you give them, hey, look, just look at this data, and you're constantly reposting your data and guiding them to your site. So it's, at this point, being ignorant is on yourself. It's not on you. It's not on themselves. It's just on their just behavior. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because
you
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say something else too, is when people speak of the Tridactyls, as we mentioned, it's good to use specific specimen names, whether it's Suye with spinal eminences about a foot tall, Josephina, the so-called reptilian ET looking ones, or your classic sort of elongated head aliens. They all have different names, and they even each have slight differences in one another. They're not exactly the same across the board, which could infer various degrees of primate or species X or Tridactyl.
Yeah, but it almost seems like it could have been a way that you could have seen evolution firsthand if you just pay attention to the puzzle pieces. Seeing how this went to that part, seeing what the time frame of these bones are, and what I'm saying, line them up and just say, hey, this could have happened here. What was the oxygen levels on planet Earth? What was the nitrogen, all this other stuff? What was their diet? The way they moved. That's what I talk about. Going through the studies of being a detective, when you're trying to do your due diligence, you can't stop where it makes you feel good. You can't.
I mean, I have a theory on the reproductive system, and it's very shaky. It's not super strong, And I just saw a researcher suggest that they found some reproductive organs that I hadn't seen. I'm not actually a biologist or a medical professional. I'm a former archaeologist, working archaeologist, paleontological technician, which means I'm not a paleontologist. In fact, when all the paleo guys went out west to go look up dinosaurs, I was stuck minding the store, watching the Graves Museum of Archaeology and Natural History in Dania Beach, Florida, where I ran the education department. So, one of the reasons I got into this was the cultural aspects, and also because I felt that because I had a sort of personal revelation with these beings, meaning, I, like everyone else, thought they were fake. I'm like, oh man, another alien autopsy? No thanks. Skip. Seriously, I was done with it. I was moving on to probably, who knows, science fiction, gaming, something, acting perhaps. But then my friend is like, hey, did you check out those alien mummies? I'm like, no. Well, you might want to. And since we have to rely on a little bit of trust and credibility, I trusted that person. They had enough credibility just for me to rethink my previous thoughts and investigate this more, which I'm glad I did. Upon researching it more, I had my aha moment when I recognized them. And what I mean by that is I recognized them from an anthropology class 20 years previously. Not only that, but of all the questions, if you were in school, can you remember any questions you asked your teachers? I remember asking my professor, who was the head of the Americas department of the anthropology department. And I said, hey, these petroglyphs of wide-headed beings with 3 fingers, I'm sure I didn't word it that way back then, honestly. I said, these petroglyphs in Canada look like the petroglyphs in the Caribbean. Is there any connection? And what did he say? No, there's no connection. They're thousands of miles and is equally many years apart. How could there be a connection? I suggest he was wrong at this stage. So yes, I did recognize what I say, a cordiform. This is a big part of my theory. Cordiform is heart-shaped. So when you look closely at the tridactyl face, it has a heart-shaped face, which is depicted in the petroglyphs, depicted in rock art across the world. And so, that was my personal revelation. It's like, oh, I know what these are. So that made it personal. And that's when I first dove in and I just began to reiterate the previous studies of men like Clifford Miles, who's a Canadian paleontologist. Now I like to bring him up because one of the things, and I don't usually say people's names because I like to try to keep it impersonal, but I'm going to say Will Brown of Incredible History alluded to, well, and I'm going to paraphrase, so don't quote me here, alluded to, well, you know how those Latin American countries are. You can't really trust those Latin American countries. That's what he was alluding for. We need some real science from the Americas. But what he was doing there is a couple of things. That's an ad hominem distraction. That has nothing to do with the science. That has to do with his subjective interpretation. When meanwhile, we have a Canadian paleontologist who himself was riffing off of data points from a Russian team of medical doctors from St. Petersburg, Russia. So already it's not just about Latin America, is it? And then finally, we even have what I call the Great White Hope. We had this old white American guy who looks like right out of Central Casting, Dr. John McDowell, came out and said these are authentic beings. And I'm like, oh, there you go. There's your hero you're looking for, right? Even that wasn't enough, though. So even to this day, you'll see people like him disregarding this, what's turning into a global, an international effort, if you count myself as well, a former archaeologist in Florida, working towards the truth on this. So it's very disingenuous to not only slant that ad hominem attack against Latin America, but to woefully ignore all the other researchers involved, including now he does try to he paints Dr. Zauce Benitez as sort of a disingenuous actor himself. But you have to keep in mind, Dr. Jose Zauce Benitez was the lead forensic officer for the Mexican Navy. And he too was faced repercussions because of his assertions. So what they've done is, rather than attack the science, they try to attack the individuals. And that's a clue when anyone who's watching this or involved in this, if you're listening to emotional pleas and you're listening to ad hominem and they're not discussing the science, that's a problem. That's a propaganda hit piece, in my opinion.
Wow. Yeah, I just don't understand, why do people want to hide history? Why do they want to hide the fact that there was something before? Like, as much as everybody talks about how much, they want to know, it seems like there's more pushback rather than, asking for help. You know, one of the, especially now that we have GoFundMe for everything nowadays, we can't get a GoFundMe account that says, hey, this will go to archaeological digs, this will go into DNA testing, this will go into, you know, this, that, and the third, and somebody will be in charge of making sure everything's okay, blah, blah, blah. You know, asking help from the community, especially the people that say they want to help find out the truth. I know you've had a lot of pushback on there and on this, and this is interesting because you provide what you know. I've heard all kinds of stuff where people said it was just bones put together, it was this, it was just, you know, you heard that's the biggest one, that's why you laugh, right? That's the biggest one that people say, right?
Yeah, because the scans are available, and even a novice, I've shown these scans, and you could say that, well, these people, maybe they're not qualified enough, but to me it was the opposite. It was more like, you can take someone who is not a medical doctor, but it's still in the medical field, and they're qualified enough to suggest, I don't see any seams, I don't see any glue. I mean, that would be glaringly obvious. And, you know, even just, you know, looking at us, looking at Montserrat here. So all these scans are available to people. And so they can go in themselves. In fact, if people want, they can go to Tridactyls.org, where Maria and Wawita are medical scans that are available to the public. You can go there yourself, get yourself the 3D slicer, DICOM reader, or you can go to the-alien-project.com, the original researchers, and they have created wonderful 3D animations that you could go with your kids, and you can move around the mummies and look at the bones yourself. Everything has been very, very upfront. And you speak about raising money. I have not performed any sort of fundraiser. I have a bad habit, even from my my theater days, of doing things for free. A lot of times I feel like, why, you know, what are we worth being paid for? So I am not prepared to accept donations until, you know, these other hands-on researchers perhaps need funding themselves.
No, I said that for like the people who want to counter your argument because they don't back their stuff off there, and a lot of times they say that it's because of the funds that they don't have. So everyone that's trying to go against what you're saying, they can raise the funds and get the information. But then, like you said, the information is free, and that's why I said that you give it out for free, so they don't have to do that. But if they want to say that you're wrong 100%, they have to do those tests, and they don't. They go, they look at your scans and they said that's not it, and then you ask them, okay, well, can you tell us and show us, you know, how these scans are wrong and so on and so forth, and they won't do it. They'll just say this is wrong. And like you said, one of the things that they said was glue.
Yeah. One of the things they said was what?
The one thing you said was talking about the glue part, about how
well, yeah, even to this day, find someone who is coming up with this theory that they're fabricated, and have them explain it to you in some way that is sensible. And even their experts who they've gotten to look at the bones, it's funny. The important thing about Wawita is that Wawita's hands and feet were manipulated. Digits were removed. So you can look at Wawita, compare her to Maria or Montserrat, who we just had on the screen, and you can see the difference between digits removed and digits that weren't. You know, I think one of the most important witnesses to all of this is the plastic surgeon. Of all people, who would you have thought that a plastic surgeon would be key to this discovery? But the plastic surgeon is the one looking at the skin saying, I don't see any modifications. And, you know, Dr. John McDowell, I should mention, won the 2024 Gradwald Laureate Award, for which is essentially giving the award to the best forensic doctor in America. But that's someone they don't talk about much.
You know, yeah, and it's interesting. I also wanted to let you know, I think you went off the screen on there. We got your different screen on. But what I wanted to talk to you about was because this is all in the near Peru area, right? Like, as far as
what is that? That's your screen that's up there.
Yeah, that's mine. That's when you was talking about tridactyls.org.
Ah, I
I
was off
brought
screen.
this up. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Oh, good, 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 good. So we're good though. You can see me, right?
yeah, yeah. I can see you. Yeah, but
Yeah. So
it's
Tridactyls.
interesting.
So just to let people know, just to reiterate, so the-alien-project.com. Those are the original South American researchers.
Mhm.
Tridactyls.org kind of leans towards the Mexican team and the American team. They were very kind to allow me early access to the slides, which has been invaluable. You know, I was supposed to go to Peru to see the bodies, and there were so many different issues that I didn't go. And it's strange, even though I didn't go, I stayed home, of course, reading and watching and looking at all the slides. And I started to make more discoveries after more discoveries, which is interesting. I always said, what am I going to do if I go there? I'm just going to get the best selfie ever. And that's what you see a lot of these, I call them the, adventure tourism guys, the khaki shirt mafia that's out there. They're all just, they're all just getting, cool selfies. It's like, okay, yeah. It's like, I don't really want to just go and get a cool selfie. There's more information in the slides than on the exterior. Ideally, hopefully in the spring, maybe I will get a chance to go down there with perhaps some sort of high-powered lens or a microscope and see if we can find a little more information.
Let me ask you this. So, of course, you believe these are real. What's the one thing that keeps you wanting to research more? Like, what's the one thing that you haven't found that you're looking for?
Oh, I'd like to tighten up that reproductive system. My recent discovery is super cool. You pulled that up. If you want to pull it up again, that is my proboscis theory.
Oh yeah. Huh.
I don't even want to say, I try to differentiate between hypothesis and theory. I try to use theory when I feel it's a little more concrete, and hypothesis if it's a little like, maybe. But that was a wonderful just combining of data points with the Cliff Miles suggesting that there was a fleshy organ behind the sinuses, behind the nostrils, combined with what was suggested from the other team of suggesting that there is a tiny feeding tube, to what I saw in the scans as I locate what I believe are larval forms in the scans. I noticed that a high density tube-like structure was leaving the larval skulls and entering the skulls of siblings whom they predated on.
You talking about this right here?
Let's see. Yes.
Okay.
And usually that's an early draft. So again, I do things in real time. So that means that will require a more formal info meme later on for people to digest. But yeah, that is that's pretty much what I've come up with here. It also explains the cranial ridges that can be seen on many of them, which is a hummingbird type parallel. So basically, I combine, again, Cliff Miles' assertion on a fleshy piece behind the nose, the tube-like structure in the mouth that suggested by the researchers that they ingested liquid, and then combined with what I believe in the scans are images of such things.
Yeah, this stuff is amazing because, in mythology. Well, let me ask you this: how tall are they, first of all? I just want to make sure
that one right there, I believe that's Josephina. She's 60 centimeters. And so Josephina, based on Victoria's DNA, means that she may be about 5% Homo primate. And it can be seen, I suppose, in her supraorbital arches. Those arches are very chimpanzee-like in actuality, very much like an ape. So someone like Maria, however, is like 30+% Homo/primate. So that's the difference you're getting right there. That's the other thing. When people dismiss one body over the other, they dismiss the little ones. Well, the little ones are definitely dolls. To me, the little ones I've focused on, because they're definitely not dolls, because of that furcula, because of that gastralia and other discoveries. I believe I found the impetus to our third eye. So, I have this saying that says the archaeology is predicting the biology, and the cosmology or mythology. The mythology is predicting the biology also, because the mythology is predicated on the biology. So what I'm suggesting is these images of forked tongues and allusions to third eyes are thanks to these beings.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's funny you talk about the mythologies, because in all mythologies, well, at least on every continent, there's stories or traditional oral stories about individuals who are small like that. They even have mythologies about
Yes.
three-finger individuals too. So, and these are supposed to be swift moving, sometimes intelligent individuals. Sometimes some people would even confuse them. If you look at and I've read this, I know some people are probably going to laugh, but some people even consider them, this is where the original fairies came from, or the leprechauns came
Absolutely.
from.
This,
Yeah.
right. The name fairy will, of course, throw people off. Maria is missing a coccyx, but my identification of this fused vertebra. Now, again, so this is a good example of how things go with this sort of research. So someone like Miles, the paleontologist, or one of the other researchers will say, oh, the vertebra are fused. I go and look at the fused vertebra, and to me, it looks like a Eurostyle, which is a frog parallel. After they resorb their tail, they're left with this elongated bone in the back end. So that was one of those clues, like suggestions of cutaneous breathing, no lungs, the tridactyly, which can be found in salamanders and frogs. And now we have this Eurostyle, I suggest is the proper term for it, alluding to an amphibian lifestyle, which means Maria, who has no navel, has no belly button, which means there was no umbilical cord in her development. Maria could be a mermaid. Now we're gonna mermaids.
No, I'm not gonna laugh, because I'm gonna go straight
you're
to
not,
the
but everyone
mythology.
else is, and it's like, hey man, I'm just telling you what I found. They've got a Eurostyle, it looks like to me. That's my hypothesis, that alludes to having a tail. I want to show you a quick scan here of what could be these proboscis in the creatures. And this is, I probably have better images. This is just a recent image, so it's going to feel like some people, like a blurry Bigfoot picture. Unfortunately, a lot of people there's almost like an entitlement. They demand high quality HD photos. And I like to say, this isn't Bigfoot. This isn't some blurry UFO. This is unfortunately larval forms that I suggest are 0.5 centimeter, 5 millimeters, 1/5 of an inch. Okay.
So, it's so funny. It's so funny.
Awful
you
picture.
Say that.
That's an awful picture. I get it. I'll try to find a better one. But this is why I'll do little things like this, which just makes me look a little more unhinged.
Yeah.
But as I explained I had to explain to a friend of mine, he's like, how do you know it's not pareidolia? And it's,
well, what is that? What is that? Because I don't even know what that is.
So pareidolia?
Yeah.
Pareidolia is essentially when you look at a cloud and you say, hey, I see Snoopy.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, I got you. You see what your brain wants you to see.
Right. So that seems to be like there's a lot of low branch theories. Of the first low branch theory, people say, well, they cut the fingers off. And then you tell them there's no evidence for that.
Right, yeah.
And so, another low branch theory is pareidolia. And it's funny. People say that for artifacts I show them, for biology I show them. So it's become this sort of like staple response, which has become now super meaningless to me. Like that, it just means nothing. In fact, I looked up a term called agnosia, which means you don't know what the hell you're seeing. That's what I tell them, well, maybe you have agnosia. What's that? You don't know what the hell you're looking at.
Man, I'm going to have to look that word up. I love words. Yeah. I love dictionary words.
Yeah. So it's not pareidolia if I'm seeing across forms a continuity of shapes. So even though that's a bad image, I'm sure if you give me a couple of minutes, we can find another image that shows another heart-shaped face with another high density tubular structure coming from its mouth. And when I say high density, that's the other thing. I had to explain it to even people who are close to me, who are still maybe on the fence, but maybe believe some of this stuff, that when we look at the scans, I will put, for example, let's use Maria or Montserrat as an example. We'll do it right here live. So what I'll do is we'll look at Montserrat, and we're at what's called a bone setting, which also happens to have flesh. And I'll go to something called soft tissue. Okay. Now with the soft tissue, what we'll do is we will remove a layer. We can also play with just even the density of that, as you see, right? Becomes a skeleton. Let's start off like pretty thick though with flesh. And as you remove layers, now keep in mind too, I've added a Python script that allows me to look at these in, they'll take like, I believe like 3 slices, each 3/4 of a millimeter. So every mouse move that you make requires you to take a look at these in close up. So I'm going to go ahead and try to remove a layer here. Let's see. Sometimes you have to get the right angle. There we go. All right. So I'm moving in. Now, as you see what happens, we'll go ahead and we'll zoom in on this area. It looks like the hip here because it's the first area that is affected. So this is a soft tissue setting. So that bright white intensity is bone. Mm-hmm. Those other shapes, I suggest these gray soft shapes are flesh within the bone. So what does that mean? And if you
are you presenting it right now?
Oh, geez. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. The bone. That's the bone.
See,
right
I
there,
can
right?
see it, of course. So this is, again, let's just repeat. So this is Montserrat on a soft tissue setting. I've removed a layer or two, which might only be, again, maybe perhaps a millimeter and a half, perhaps 1/10 of a centimeter, however you want, however it registers in your brain. But these gray soft flesh shapes are within the bone. And we can even, now, right now, there's maybe nothing that even myself could say, oh, that's something. But there's definitely gray larval shapes. Or so I should say not larval, we'll say fleshy shapes for now. Let's see if we can get something.
So that. And what kind of exact scan was that captured that? This
is, I believe they call it a CT scan is the proper term.
Scan. So that's like one of the best ones that they need right there. That's the ones where people go to see, because I've had a couple of those done. Those are where people go see if they have any issues inside them. Like they can see very detailed information, like very detailed information.
Okay, here's something possibly here.
That and you know what? That's another thing that that I understand that kind of makes me wonder why people don't believe in these things. The scans are available, but let me ask you, what is the challenge, or what is the challenges that people face to go get the scans themselves and test it in their own facilities, or can they test it at the facilities
right now? Any citizen can go to the-alien-project.com and look at their 3D representations. It's not a bad place to start, especially for children. Your kids will probably be able to like navigate these things better. Or you can go to Tridactyls.org, where they've been so kind enough to make Maria and Wawita available to the public. Now, while they suggest that Wawita is a sort of faux Tridactyl, fake Tridactyl, she's had her digits removed. When I go into Wawita, her interior reminds me of Montserrat and Maria, and I believe too that she has the larval forms in her. So even though the digits were manipulated, she is still a specimen to be examined.
When you say digits manipulated, what do you mean by that?
Her Wawita's fingers and toes were cut off to resemble a Tridactyl. So it's as though maybe she was born and they were disappointed that she wasn't fully Tridactyl, and they tried to rectify that.
So,
and you asked, so now as far as someone like Montserrat here, the Tridactyls.org team still makes it so you would have to apply for the rest of them. They want to see who they're giving this to, part of just curiosity. But they want to give it to people who are interested in finding the medical truth of this. And again, the other website, Alien Project, they've made a lot of these videos available. So my first investigation before the scans was actually just the video. And unfortunately, I did have to copy it myself, which so it allowed me to zoom in, where I believe I found my first larval form in Artemis, which looked like it was either emerging from an egg or feeding off the top of it. You know, another dramatic part of this discovery is that I believe these larval forms can be seen within the skull. Now, the skull should have limited material in it, perhaps, you know, the brain, but even going into the skull, we might be able to find some interesting, at very at least interesting shapes, like right here.
Right.
So
what was that alien project website again?
Alien project.com.
The dash alien dash project.com. Okay.
So I discussed earlier that these things require continuous investigation. So no better example than that are these scans, because I'm suggesting, as in here, that these are, I'm trying to zoom in, but every time I zoom in, oddly, it like disappears for some reason. Isn't that weird? So right here is maybe one of our best ones we've found today. And what you can do is, if you want to test yourself, I could say, okay, I think this is a larva. Oh my God, there it goes again. It must be acting weird just because they're online. And I can go and look at another scan, and we can try to find that same shape in another part of the scanning here. So this is a sagittal slice. It's a sideways slice of Montserrat. Oops. Of course, part of what I'm doing is, right, it's looking through my own light here too to try to look at my screen. I've got 3 screens open, so it can be a little difficult. All right, so where were we? We were in the skull, and I think I put a mark down. Well, let's see if we can find that mark.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to just sort of test your theory.
Yeah.
And so we are here, and sure enough, there is strange gray soft tissue. So I was going to say to even the skeptics, what you can do is, I mean, there's the pareidolia can happen also. Believe me, like right now, what is you know, am I experiencing pareidolia? Because there's a lot going on in this image right here that could allude to something else. I don't know. I almost see like a shape here. Really, our focus should be, I get very distracted, are these gray larval forms. So what I can do is, using, I don't know if you can see it. So you take your mouse, anybody who's watching, and you move your mouse over something that looks like high density, like a bone, which would be black in this case. And you'll get a reading on the side that'll tell you the density of this thing. So when people suggest pareidolia, I can show you that a bone might be as high as a 2,000 Housefields or HU density. I can then hover over what I suggest is an eye, a little black dot could be possibly an eye. Let me reverse this to go back to the other imagery. And eyes in these scans come up -1,000 because it turns out our eyes act more like air. They're so empty, void of substance. But then if you look at what I call the rostrum or the beak, well, then that's going to be somewhere in the middle. So the point is, there is a little bit of science to this pareidolia, where I can show you that there is a varying degree of intensity in these slides.
Yeah, some of them have hair too. Like I've noticed that website that you was talking about, Alien Project. I think it's this one right here. Yeah, you could tell that when you're looking at the video that it has, some of them have a little bit of hair on there.
Yeah, that's definitely rare. So that would, what would that suggest? That would suggest they're probably less amphibian, right, and more mammalian, right?
Yeah, it's
Have you
just
heard of the
amazing.
aquatic ape theory?
That's the one where they was in the ape like in the water, right?
Right. So what's
Yeah,
suggested is that bipedalism
yeah,
actually developed from a species that
yeah.
emerged from the water. I tried contacting one of the women who was a promoter of that theory. She had since passed, so I tried contacting her descendants, and I wanted to suggest, hey, this discovery here sort of justifies your ancestors' hypothesis.
I'm going to tell you some things because it's very interesting. This stuff is this. The reason why this stuff is interesting to me is because the many different types that there are. So when you talk about the ape-like individuals or the mermaids and stuff, when I go to mythologies, the oldest myths that are recorded, supposedly considered by academia, is from the Sumerians. And they have depictions in the Mesopotamians. We'll just say the Mesopotamians, period. They have depictions of what is considered mermaid-like species. Okay.
Dagon and Oannes, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. So you
These
already know
gods
about
that
that.
the gods that are, yeah. And what did those gods do? They brought civilization,
Knowledge. Yeah, they brought knowledge.
and
See, and
that
that's
is
interesting.
also across the board, that
Yeah.
theory.
Now see, this is where now you speaking my language a lot more because now I understand you a lot better because I see where you're going with this. A lot of people know about the Anuna / the Anunnaki, and they all say that they came from some planet named Nibiru that orbits our sun every 3,600 years. The texts actually say, and even their gods even are depicted as gods coming from the water, and those gods were bringing civilizations to
And that's
humans,
across the
basically.
board. It's not just, it's that's the other thing about this. Academia, like my professor, will suggest things like, oh, this is independent innovation. So that's something they'll use for the theory of, let's say, even something as simple as a bow and arrow. So they'll suggest that, well, these people invented the bow and arrow, and these people thousands of miles away invented the bow and arrow. They're not related culturally, so that bow and arrow has to be an independent innovation. Well, I am at the stage now where I no longer believe independent innovation, and even something as complex as a bow and arrow to me says there's no way that's the same people thought of this independently. So I believe in a term that is frequently dismissed, which is hyperdiffusion. That is to say that it is a cultural trait that spread across the world. And that includes what we were just talking about.
So, like, you will only use a tool when you need it. If you don't have a tool, if you don't have a need for a bow and arrow, then why are you going to, go out your way to make it? Somebody else that needs it will bring it to you later on. Later on. I mean, we can look at around the world right now and see that where, certain groups of people will have certain things before other people, and other people won't catch on to it until, years later, or, depending on what it is.
Right.
And
so, I think one of the problems with understanding these is that each archaeologist may have found these heart-shaped faces and came up with a different explanation or a different name for them. So check this out. Let's go back a little here. So, whoa. Oh, I see what happened. Let's go back to this. So this is about my first larval discovery. So I actually have some of these here. Good chance they're replicas. So I do have my own, this might be a replica of that specific one for all we know. So these are called Hongshan pig dragons.
mm-hmm.
And this was one of my clues that the ancients were well aware of the Tridactyl larval stage.
Okay.
Also, we can see in South America and cultures like Nazca proper, the Paracas cultures and whatnot, serpentine forms. So this is my first clue. It's like, oh, the ancients knew about these, and they likely went through a metamorphosis. So this discovery allowed me to go into the bodies and start to look for these things. So let's see if we can take a look at the first larval form I found simply using the video from that alien-project.com.
Okay.
So these are the 3 eggs of Artemis. I think someone suggested there may even be a 4th. And as we go around, I might even just go to, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to full screen here. Of course, it's on I do make a lot of content for the cell phones because I figure that's what people are looking at. So there we go. We have something coming out of the egg, it looks like. Here's a top view of what looks like a serpentine head.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving around. Almost a sphinx-like face with a broad, there we go, face there. Really, I want to get to the last shot, which just is a profile, which I think is pretty definitive of what's happening here. So this looks like it's either emerging or perhaps even partially feeding on the egg once we get to the shot here. Here it comes. Let's see, we're going to get another close-up. That might be it. That might be it. Okay, so going back, I don't know if we quite got the full. Let me go back one more time just to show everybody so we can make sure we're on the same page. Okay, great. I can help maybe point out some things. So we're looking at the top here and what looks like a eye and the reflective hand. So what's interesting about the tridactyl hand is they have a unicarpal. They have one singular palm bone, which would explain why this is a little bit more high density. So this is what I suggest was my first larval form, sort of mimicking those Hongshan pig dragons. Here's another scan that the researchers took, which could be demonstrating a serpentine sort of mermaid, if you will. With the tail here, this is the same specimen I was just looking at from a different angle, which looks like the skull. And my research began too by looking at these eggs where I started to see larval forms with the eggs. Here's what I'm talking about by these black dots. So we could say they're pareidolia, but that is classic eyeballs in the scans. Almost like you might, if you were to scan maybe shrimp or even perhaps even snake larvae.
Okay.
So those black dots were a clue to eyes. Let's see if we got any other shots here. Again, some early images. You should be able to see some serpentine shapes here. The again, 2 eyes and what looks like they're burrowing into the bone here.
Yep.
Other serpentine shapes. More serpentine shapes here. A face with an eye, the serpentine tail. Again, the black eyes. We can see the orbital arches a bit here. So we're starting to see that cordiform heart-shaped face. Here's some nice images. I don't know if that helps people. It's interesting the color that comes up too. It really helps define. So what I suggest here again is another larval form with its eyes. You can see the spinal cord here. This is some artistic interpretations to help people understand what we're seeing in these things.
Yep. Yeah. See, this is one of the reasons why I got interested in what you were saying. I'm gonna tell you after this presentation because this is interesting.
This is one of my favorites. This was found in Louisa. I believe it shows where the tail will be resorbed here into that Euro style. And this tail, which since you appreciate the myths, right? This is not a tail, but I think when we see fish tails and other things depicted, it's actually their fused feet before separation.
Right, right.
And I even suggest that they're using their little limbs and that little unicarpal. Again, we can see a little bit of reflection there. And what it's doing, it's grasping a smaller, more serpentine, earlier juvenile, because due to the fact that they're sort of stuck in the bodies, I suggest that the diatomaceous earth that covers the bodies and the cadmium chloride, which covers the bodies, is all part of this larva management. So while it may preserve the bodies, it may ultimate purpose was to contain these larval forms.
Okay. You know, this stuff, I just love the scans. I'm telling you, that's evidence. I don't know what more people want. I just don't know what more people want.
Other people have looked at this image and they say, hey, that reminds me of a tree frog. So what you are seeing, to help people understand, is, yes, the black dots are probably one of the easiest ways to locate these. That's a good place to start. If you're hunting larvae, I call it a larva hunt. But also their rostrum beaks. So they have like a turtle-like beak with sort of proto-fangs in the beak. Those are going to be higher reflective. So they're going to come up higher density and brighter color.
Okay. And all this information comes from just your specialty. This is your specialty. You went to school for this, right?
Well, if it wasn't for me taking the anthropology class, right, then I wouldn't have been able to, because what skill set am I really using here? It's really sort of just fortunate luck and fate, because I happen to be in the class where I saw the petroglyphs. Then when I started looking into the archaeology, where I say the archaeology predicts the biology, it's because of that I was able to look at these artifacts, and instead of just dismissing them as mythology, right? I said, oh, they knew about these. They knew that they were amphibians. They knew they went through a metamorphosis. So then because of something like this, I was able to go into scans and look for these and find. So people are like, well, how come you can find them and the doctors aren't? I'm like, as I described to you, these are tiny, tiny little things. The one I said it was one of my favorites, the body of the last slide, that's only 1 centimeter long, that creature. And it was tucked under a rib. So you're not going to just casually see this. I think most of the medical professionals are looking at this from a grander scale. I knew better to look at close-ups. So that's all. That's the only reason that my background really has anything to do with it. I see something else reflective here that is part of my studies. This being up here. So hopefully you can see the 2 dots. Yeah. Hopefully you can see a reflective higher density there, which is likely its beak. But I also think the parietal third eye is coming up here.
No, it's just fascinating, because I'm telling you, people always want evidence, and you give them evidence, and then they're never happy with what they have.
They're never happy.
You talked about the doctors and all this. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of different people, with PhDs from all kinds of fields also. And they all told me that eventually you can either go with the grain or you can go against the grain. And one of them told me what they meant by that was that when something doesn't make sense anymore, do you just go with the flow, or do you say, hey, what does this really mean? And then eventually, if you go against the grain, you get looked at as below them. And a lot of people fear that. So because they feel like they have to care about what other people feel about them or think about them, or it could be a job position or something like that.
And guess what? I don't. So that was another unique trait that has given me, in addition to the anthropology, is that I have this determination. I don't listen to other people. I know how human nature is. I know they're going to be dismissive. I know they're not going to believe it. I mean, my own friends are like, well, I don't really give a shit.
Well, that's the hardest ones to convince, is your friends and family.
So it's like, they don't care. So it's like, that's what you're up against, and then even the skeptics, I was just talking to one of the skeptics last night, and he's like, well, obviously it's fake, blah, 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 blah. And then I said something else. He said, prove it. I thought to myself, why? Why am I going to bother proving attempt to prove anything to you when you've already dismissed it, wholesale?
Yeah, eventually you get tired of it. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I grew up on Jerry Springer, so I like going back and forth. I don't know why. It's just entertainment for me sometimes. So
You like the debating.
yeah, I like it because I know I'm right. If I know I'm right, I only speak on something that I know I'm right on, and my
Oh,
right is just
same.
going to the book. You know what I'm saying? So if it's going to be a debate, it's mostly going to be me just shouting out sources. You know, me just saying, "Hey, this
Yeah,
book
and
said
I
this."
do like to debate to a degree,
Yeah,
but there gets to a point where someone's just sort of willfully ignorant. So here
yeah,
we have some close-ups of what I believe are the tridactyl faces. So again, follow the if you have trouble understanding what we're looking at, follow the black dots as a sort of
yeah,
reference as the eyes, and
yeah.
note, like this one here.
You know, I actually started noticing that now that you're showing that more. I'm noticing that more.
Right. I
I'm
think it's an
noticing that
educational process. It's not just you're going to see it right away, which
yeah,
is
because your
why
brain
I.
don't know to look for it.
Mm-hmm. So focus on the black eyes as a sort of reference. And then, as I told my a friend of mine, your next step could be note the white triangle in the middle of the two eyes.
Yeah, that would be like the
That's
nose and the
that's the
cavity stuff.
rostrum beak.
Yeah,
And then
right.
even on this one here, you can. What's great, it's actually it looks better on your screen than it does on mine. It's interesting. I've taken pictures of my screen with my phone, and the image looks better sometimes. I'm like, why is that?
You
So
ever heard of Topaz?
no,
Topaz
the
would clear that
stone.
up. So it's an
Oh,
AI
really?
program. Yeah, it's an AI program for photography and stuff like that. It will get risk. It'll
Oh,
try to clear that up. Yep.
so yeah, so we can see that rostrum beak, and you might even be able to see like the supraorbital arches are going to be a little more bony, so that's a little more reflective. So yeah, I try to overwhelm people with the evidence, and
No,
and
I
you know,
see it now. I look at the black dots and I'm like, okay, I can see the eyes now. That I don't have a college degree or anything like that. I was in the military and I spent my time in the military, and then I was wounded in combat, and then I had to medically retire. And then ever since then, I just started taking classes. So I take classes on this website called edx.org, is where you can take all these classes for free,
oh,
like from
cool.
Harvard, Penn State, MIT, so
Hmm.
on and so forth, like that. So I just take random classes ever so often on there. And you can take as many as you want as long as you're doing it, right? It doesn't matter. You can get the free version or you can get the paid version where they send you a certificate after you pass the class. I did one of those. But it's the same information. So I took an anthropology class from I think like this all
Oh,
girls
awesome.
school. Yeah, I took it from this all girls school called Wesley or something like that. It's like an all female school
Yeah,
where
Wesley.
they were. Yeah, I think
Mostly.
that's what it's called. Yeah, but
Where
they
is
was all
that? Do you
female.
know?
I can't remember.
I
But
used to
they was all.
party at all girls schools back in the day in Massachusetts. I would roll
I
up in
think that's
my
I think that's where it's closely at. I think if I'm not
yeah, because
mistaken.
There's Smith College, and maybe Wesley may have been the other one. But yeah, I would
Yeah.
roll up in my 1972 Cadillac hearse and my black biker
Oh,
jacket.
so you an OG with it then, huh? You had the Cadillac, the old school, but that was old school time for you. So you had the classic, you had the modern.
Good times. That's a good memory to
I,
have.
I, I bet
I
you.
know.
I bet you.
Speaking of classes, I saw that Rutgers was teaching a xenoanthropology class, and that's what I identify as. That's
Yeah.
I identify as a xenoanthropologist. People are like, what? I mean, you could argue I'm still just doing anthropology, but obviously the xeno part adds a little bit of interest to it. Hey, before we leave this slide, even this one here, those eyes are looking a little clearer. I feel on that one.
Yeah.
So what else we got? Is that it for that might be the last of my larva slides.
Yeah, it was in Massachusetts. I just looked it up. You was over there, and you was over there at that school.
See? Good times, my man. Oh man. Good times. I did get lucky at least once.
Oh,
I think I
man.
was better looking back then. I spend so
Oh.
much time on the biology that sometimes I don't know how long we have today. Not the biology of women, but I don't spend enough time in that. But I spend enough time in the biology of the Tridactyls. I hardly sometimes touch upon the cultural. So can we get into some of that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm interested in, is because of the simple fact of the mythologies, you know, the culture. Like the myths are the cultures. That's what they are. You know, when you mention myths, when I look at the dictionary at the word myth is, it literally just says traditional oral story. But it does have another definition that says that it may be fiction. But usually the first
Mm,
definition is traditional oral story. Then the second one is fiction. So this is
right.
my thing. I like to look at the etymology of words because I like to go to the origins of what the words meant. If we're going to talk about a specific time frame, we're going to have to use that word for that specific time frame. When was these things found, and what words were they using at that time, and what that did that word mean at that time frame, because it can change. I mean, we know words change over time anyway.
They sure do.
So
And
that's
you're right. You've alluded to just the glory and the fun of words. And you know, myself, I have put my, you said you took classes. You know, I feel like I've at least earned a master's degree on my own on Tridactyls,
yeah,
just putting 3 years of constant study. And when I try to emphasize to people, you know, this is what I've been doing 9 to 5. So even now
yeah,
interacting with you, you know, I consider this is part of my job, because I'm trying to educate the public, because I knew I had to get ahead of AI, CGI, lying
yeah. We talked
politicians,
about that.
skeptics, all of this. We're living in a BS age, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get ahead of this as much as I could and bring as much truth to this story. Are you familiar with Paul Wallace?
Yeah, yeah. He's yeah. He
Yeah,
got a
I've
book called
adopted.
he got a
Yeah,
couple of books out that I've read from him.
right. So
The
he
Eden
uses the
series,
term.
I think it's called.
Yes, he uses the term ancestral narrative, which I like a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I'll also use the term cosmology instead of
Mm,
mythology, because yes, mythology, oh, that's just a myth, meaning people are dismissing it as a
yeah,
lie, essentially. I suggest that the whole of religion is really just meant to be remembrance, not worship,
yeah, yeah,
remembrance. And
yeah,
that's part of
yeah,
the reason why cultures repeat things in an oral tradition,
yeah,
because an oral tradition is going to be a little bit harder, I think, to maybe manipulate than actual writing if you keep
yeah,
repeating the same thing. And I think that's ultimately religion is repeating the tales so we don't forget the ancestors.
yeah. No, you're 100% right. That's the reason why I study mythologies. I actually, like I said, I wrote a book, Journey Through the Origins of History. It was on Amazon, and I got it for free. I got it for free. I got a couple of copies for free that wouldn't mind sending you. It's basically the mythologies in all the from almost all the continents minus Antarctica. And I talk
Okay.
about these mythologies to the point where I give you the basics of it. Like, one of the first things that I wanted to learn about what you was sharing and what the Tridactyls were was what was the basics of them. Why they are important. Well, they could be a species that could have been intelligent just like us. They could be the reasons why for a lot of these uh pyramids and stuff. And I say that only
Mm-hmm.
because of the simple fact that a lot of people are so concerned and so trippy about ancient Egypt and the pyramids over there, but there are older pyramids in Peru, in that area, in the Americas. There's older pyramids here in the Americas than there is in Egypt. And there's always an argument about which one is older, but most of the people stand on the ground that, hey, that in Peru they had the oldest pyramids,
Hmm.
or in the
Well,
surrounding
what
area.
I'm reminded of is why some cultures acknowledge termite mounds as representations of ancestors.
Yeah, like ant people for the Native Americans. The Sumerians have a group of individuals that were considered a type of ant people, I guess you could say. Mesopotamians, I would say. African traditions. Japan even has a couple of them. I have a book that's on Japanese mythology, and I learned that Japanese and I believe Chinese mythology are almost related in a sense as the
Well,
origins on their
they
story.
certainly are related, but I'm at the stage where all of human cosmology is
Yeah,
related. And it is all as a result of an impetus of these beings here. Because I mentioned, we've talked about the biology about the possibility that these originated hundreds and hundreds of millions of years ago. But what we're about to get into now is how our ancestors viewed these beings as ancestors. So if anyone's reading this from home, again, there's my quote about the archaeology predicting the biology. I use the term mythology here instead of cosmology. And then these are some of my predictions, thanks to archaeology, that these beings were amphibian, as per the cosmological narrative, that they went through a metamorphic process. I can see forelimb first depictions in Nazca ceramics. Pineal third eye, a huge part of our culture, still talked about today. And these beings have not only what I say is a third eye, they technically have a third and fourth eye. They have a parietal pineal complex. And what I did was I sent images of what I believe is this parietal pineal complex to the definitive expert who has written on so-called four-eye lizards. He looked at the scans. I didn't tell him what he was looking at, mind you. It was sort of blind. Mm-hmm. He said, that looks like a mammal or a primate with forward-facing eyes. Why does it have that pineal complex in the top of its skull? And basically, I was like, thank you very much. You've answered my questions. Another depiction is the cross-hatched skin. So I started seeing cross-hatching. You know, our hashtag, right? I suggest that the whole of human symbolic language is developed from these beings. Our hashtag symbol, I started seeing that on ceramics, and I said, oh, this looks like they're alluding to some sort of reptilian symbolism here. Don't you know, when I got to see a close-up of the skins, that the skin has rhomboid cross-hatching patterns on it? We can go back and look at that later. And, of course, larva in the skull was predicted by Paracas fabrics that show serpentine images leaving. There are myths about the mind-born that you might know even from Greek myths, whether it's Athena or Zeus. Coming from the skull. So I started sort of putting all of these together, and it started alluding to, again, what seems to be a singular myth, a hyperdiffusion across the world. So when you say that these things are related, yes, I suggest it is literally all related.
Yeah,
we got no other signs.
Why are you looking for that? You know, it's crazy because of the simple fact that a lot of people talk about the Sumerians and how they're the first civilization, the Nuna / the Anunnaki. Now they came from a planet called Nibiru and so on and so forth. But nobody talks about the culture that was before them, and that's the Ubadians. The Ubadians are literally have what a lot of people get the idea of the reptilian like artifacts. Like it looks like some kind of reptilian type. It has tails. It looks like it could be a human is standing on, you know, its two legs and stuff like that. Sometimes it's depicted behind another artifact or is drawn behind a different artifact. But these were the individuals that inhabited that land before the Sumerians. Right. And these were considered reptilians. And that's why I say when you actually look at the Mesopotamian texts, their gods, or at least the Nuna / the Anunnaki, at least Enki at bare minimum, was the one that came from the waters, because it literally says he came from the water. The Abzu, that's the biggest clue that we have, is the Abzu. ABZU or ABZU or SU. It doesn't matter how it's spelled different ways, but that's why it's interesting to me. And they have depictions of mermaids, what some people would consider their mermaids, and that's the later Mesopotamians, you know,
which we've looked at for years as ridiculous.
Yes,
but now we're finding biological evidence. That's the thing about the Tridactyls. The Tridactyls has freed me to make new connections because we have physical evidence. You know, going back to your Batman, this is detective work. We have bodies now, so I no longer have to interpret cultural findings the way they've done in the past. I'm not beholden to the previous interpretations. Let's face it, and I think a lot of critics of archaeology say this, it's all interpretations. But now I have something to base it on. So these are examples of the petroglyphs that jarred my brain. It almost caused a sort of an existential sort of revelation, is that, wow, I know what these things are.
I want to know who would look at a depiction of something in a mermaid suit or what would look like a mermaid. I want to know what they would depict that as. Like, what else would you call that? You know, we know whatever that looks like, it's in water. You know, you don't. That's what defines water. It might not. It's just amazing to me that you can have all this evidence placed right in front of you, and you still pick and choose what you want to believe. Interpretation can only go
Something
so far.
happened along the way. I don't know what it is. I see, you know, there's a bit of that. I call it Occam's spork, where someone thinks the simplest answer, despite the evidence, is the answer. So somewhere along the ways, and here's a good example for these. So you'll hear people say, well, they depicted 3 fingers because it's easier than drawing 5. I mean, what kind of lowbrow freaking explanation is that?
Yeah,
but someone will say that on the History Channel. You know, that's the other thing I call it. You know, the old days.
It's easy.
The old days, right? You would have something come on cable, and now everybody's a freaking expert, right? And they're just quoting something that they heard from the History Channel. But looking at these petroglyphs, you not only see 3 fingers, you see cordiform, heart-shaped faces as is depicted with the. So now we have 2 data points, don't we? Now, of course, the skeptics could also be like, well, that's how they made the bodies. I am so past made the bodies if we're talking furcula, gastralia, parietal pineal complexes, urostyles, larval forms. I mean, it's just endless. So
you forgot DNA.
Oh, I forgot the DNA. By the way, isn't that funny? Because, you know, part of the thing with me is like, well, even if the DNA came back that Josephine is human, what does that mean? That means we have, like you alluded to, you alluded to earlier, essentially. Well, that means we have to redefine what's human then.
That's what I was going to say, because a Homo erectus is human, Neanderthals is human, right? Denisovans were human. Right?
Yeah, I guess technically they consider Homo sapiens, the subspecies, human. Yeah, so again, those are all part of the genus Homo. But really, you know, it's, to me, it's like pit bull versus bulldog, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Which also alludes to that maybe evolution requires a helping hand along the way.
Yeah, but these are the
a helping 3-fingered hand.
Yeah, they don't want to see what the reason why. Yeah, you know, that's interesting, because even today people are only born with just 3 fingers. So how are you going to deny that even today for some people?
Right.
Some people
so isn't that funny? So that's another example of how people are sort of like looking at things. They're like, well, people are born with 3 fingers today. So, and then that makes me say, yeah, but why is that?
Because it's supposed to come from your genes. Everything that they say, that when you're born, you're taking DNA from your whole gene pool as far back as it can go. So it might not be your grandfather, your great grandfather, great 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 grandfather. It might be somebody that was thousands of years ago, right? And
instead of looking at it as a modern mutation that developed, you're looking at it the way I look at it is like, well, hold on. Why is that?
Because it's trying to be survival. It's a survival thing.
You know, another point we should make is that I wanted to make about these petroglyphs. So the petroglyphs were found in association with spirals, which could allude to water, fertility, serpentine shapes even, but also mother goddess imagery. What we're seeing here, and we'll see another picture of this one up left.
I was just about to say that.
These are mother goddess images. So that was a big part of when we talk about, well, they're hundreds of millions of years old. What are the ancestors thinking of these if they're depicting these as mother goddesses?
That's what I'm saying. They're raising their hands up. I have a lot of books on symbology. That's what I look at a lot: symbols and symbology and signs and stuff like that. And I could tell that had to do with women or feminine, because of the hands being raised. And usually when the hands are down to the side is the male.
Huh. That is interesting. I'll have to look into that. I like that. I don't disagree. So the petroglyphs, again, I talk about the symbolic language. So petroglyphs across Europe have heart-shaped faces or heart-shaped shapes, cordiforms, cross-hatching, and even what appears to be, they look like radiating lines, but could look like a tridactyl foot or limb. The other interesting thing about this discovery is that the petroglyphs seem to be spreading inwards into land. You would expect that with human development, perhaps it came from the Middle East. This appears, to my opinion, be sort of originating from the Bay of Biscayne of water. And is it Biscayne or Vizcaya? I think Biscayne it's in Miami. Maybe I'm using the Miami term. What is it? Is it Biscayne? We'll call it the Basque Inlet there. It appears to be radiating outwards. Also, if you look at the mounds in Americas, those too appear to be radiating outwards from the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't my research. There is someone who came before me. I actually have his information. I need to interview him myself. I do run a restream on Sundays at 7 p.m. called Let's Talk Tridactyls. And I try to do it in the 7 p.m. Eastern time slot because that was the time slot that In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy took place. And, you know, people say, oh, you just wanted to be an archaeologist because of Indiana Jones. And that's actually not true. I took anthropology as a major after seeing the Patterson Bigfoot video, and my mother saying that's fake and dismissed it, only for me to get Time Life books from her aunts, which showed primitive man, Australopithecines, Paranthropus, and etc. And when I saw that image, I said, oh, so Bigfoot was real at one time. And that propelled me to get my major. So someone has done great work in categorizing heart-shaped faces, tridactyl limbs from all across the world, making note of symbolism. They've done a splendid job. Look at this piece here. I've never even really looked at this one. In France. That is incredible.
Yeah, that's symbolism right there. That's all that stuff is symbolism. You got a swastika right there. You got X marks the spot where the cross is at. You got the sticks. You got the male. Yeah, you got the petroglyphs with the male and I think the female, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you got the eyes. Yeah, you got the water, I believe. Water and mountains, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I see
also,
a lot of it. You got the amphibians.
The zigzag pattern, by the way, which again I interpreted as a water pattern.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, that's water. The one next to it is.
On closer inspection, however, looking at the larval form specifically, their spinal column makes a perfect zigzag pattern.
Like the Kundalini.
More images from across the world from this wonderful French researcher who probably got into this around maybe 2017 or so, maybe a little after, and realized
some Celtic stuff too.
Oh yeah,
you got a lot of symbolism there.
Yeah, again, I suggest the whole of human symbolism is actually inspired by these beings. Getting into more of the heart-shaped faces. Again, we see some tridactyl limbs. And you can find these in the Caribbean, across the world. Russian rivers will have these images. So I need to get in touch with this gentleman because they saved me a lot of work. Once I saw that someone had already done all this, I kind of was able to move on to other things.
No, that's good because I see a lot of symbolism. Like I said, I study a lot of signs and symbolism. I have a whole dictionary just on symbolism from the Penguin Classics. It's a very thick book, like almost 1,000 pages, just full on symbolism, what they mean, and
good old
origins
Penguin.
and all this stuff. Yeah. I love those books.
Back
Penguin and Oxford University. Yeah. But let me ask you, how do you feel about the people that talk about how it replicates or looks something like the remember the movie E.T.?
Yeah. So what does that mean? Does that mean Spielberg, who worked in close proximity with Professor Hynek, one of the contributors to the Blue Book program? And if you recall, when Close Encounters came out, we were all like, wow, those are really realistic looking. You know, some people are even like, where did they get those extras from? You know, Mars? E.T. seems to be a little too specific. In the heart-shaped face, elongated head, elongated neck. Now he has 4 fingers on the front, which may have just been an artistic choice. But the feet, I believe, are tridactyl. And those close encounter beings are so it's, I feel like Spielberg owes us an explanation. If in fact he is sincere and this is just coincidence, then we have to start thinking about, is this a subconscious development, self-conscious, emergent past memory that people are tapping into? Or is this even some sort of divine intervention that has sort of planted a seed in creators to make more of these? But I think the Occam's razor in this case is he had previous information.
You know, it always seems like that, and I say that because the reason why I'm so big in this mysteries and mythologies, religion theories, and so on and so forth, is because you see it no matter what you watch. If you watch a scary movie, 9 times out of 10, that scary movie is based on some type of traditional oral story from some ancient time. If you're watching a funny movie, they mention, they mention something about the ancient people or something in there. They always throw something historical in there. They have their alien movies, all the war movies that we used to have, all this stuff. People tell these traditional stories because they're trying to buy time. It always has something thrown in your face about it, right? And there's so much information out there, and you see that, okay, these people obviously had to know about some of these stories. Somebody in that group had to say, hey, let's talk about this and add this in there. This is a pretty cool story to add in there, especially if it's a mystery, scary movie. It's going to go to that somehow. And, you got you a lot of voodoo and hoodoo. You got you a lot of rituals. You got all those types of, Skeleton Key was I don't know if you ever seen that movie, but that movie was a pretty interesting movie about voodoo and stuff like that. About
not familiar with it.
Yes, it's just they talk about these mythologies to the point where it's thrown in your face in these movies and these shows and stuff. But when it comes to, like how you said with Steven Spielberg, did he know about something? When I learned about these Tridactyls, I grew up in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and that movie was very popular. They made a video game out of it, even though it failed. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they made a video game out of it, and they actually dumped it in some kind of dump because it was just so bad. They just wanted to bury it. So somewhere out there's like
they made a video game and they dumped all the cartridges, right?
Yeah,
it was like it was ridiculous. It was needlessly difficult to play.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the movies. I was watching Alien Romulus. And I was kind of moved emotionally. Of all the strangest scenes to get emotional about was the chest burster coming out, because in my research, the larvae are burrowing through the bones. So even that furcula I demonstrated, these larvae, I believe, are compromising the bone to an extent where these beings may even have been alive at the time with the larvae in them, doing such damage.
Yeah, and that's why I say there's so your research shows that this is something we need to look into more. Okay,
at the very least.
Yeah, at the very least, right? Look into it, and the people who are throwing shade and doing whatever they want to do to dismiss it, that's fine. You can dismiss it. That's how a good skeptic will a good researcher is a good skeptic. You know what I mean? Because you're going to go into.
And I always like to say, I was a skeptic. I didn't want to hear about the Bible. I didn't want to hear about reptilians again or the Anunnaki. And now I'm putting all of this together in this new Kool-Aid that I'm drinking.
Yeah, it's coming back to you. You try to push it away, but see, it's like a magnet. You pulling it right back to you, because that's what I said. Like, I grew up in religion. I grew up in the Catholic Church. Okay. My mom was German. My father was African American, and I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I wanted to know about religion. There were certain things in religion that I had questions about, and there were certain things that didn't make sense to me, and nobody would answer it, because the one thing they always told me was just to have faith and believe in God and Jesus and so on and so forth, right? So eventually, as I got older, I started digging into research, and I was like, okay, the Bible, I could push that away. I don't need to pay attention to that anymore. But now I have to go back to it to research it, because there's certain things that brings you back to it. Like with this Tridactyl stuff, with the many different types of species, you have different types of species on this planet that's been around for millions and millions of years. A lot of people would say they want sources. I always say that people always want sources, but do they really want it? Because what are they really concerned with? Just like you said, you don't do any funding and stuff like that. And if people want to support you, they'll support you, right? The best way to support you is by looking at your research, sharing what you shared, and that's about it. Your website is not full of any ads or anything like that. You're doing all this stuff for free. You're giving out. That's the same thing that I am. The only thing that I do sell is my book. And I just recently got monetized on X, but that was just because I was sharing my stuff. And I don't understand.
Congratulations that you were monetized, though.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just don't understand why people sit here and say that when it's time for having information, how bad do you really want it? Do you want it because you know somebody? Like when you
you said just give it the source. Again, that's one of the that's sort of a clue with some of these skeptics, is like you can't waste your time too much with them. And I want to emphasize that anyone listening, again, I mentioned it earlier, if someone is a skeptic, a legitimate skeptic, they shouldn't be talking about people, because that's ad hominem. They shouldn't be making pleas of like, oh, well, something bad could have happened, or this is a criminal enterprise, or some. Those are emotional pleas that distract from the science. The true skeptic is going to say, here's my take on the science, not here's my take on this guy's background or personality. It's a red flag that you're not dealing with a sincere skeptic.
Yeah, and that's why, because I don't have a college degree, and you talked about credentials and stuff like that, and you talked about how, people kept just saying you're a waiter and stuff like that. My books, what I share is my credentials. Okay. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you, hey, I read this book. This is what it says. Okay. Now, if you want my opinion, that's different. And I can give it to you, but I can't give you just one opinion. I have opinions about a lot of things, and some of the things that I do have opinions on includes multiple different opinions, because I can argue both points. You know what I mean? And,
well, that makes you definitely a good skeptic, for sure. A good legitimate skeptic.
Yeah, I try to argue both points. Okay. I know you say you used to be a skeptic on this, so you looked at everything as fake at one time. Now you had to prove how it was not fake. And I think, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is how I started. I wanted to prove that I was right, that it was fake, or whatever the information was incorrect. I wanted to prove I was right. Then when I found out that it was the opposite, I had to, backtrack. I always tell people this. I like it when people prove me wrong, because I learn better that way. And the reason why is because I don't want to go back and say the same stupid shit that I said earlier. You know what I mean? So, if I'm sincere about my research and I say something and you come to me and say, hey, that's wrong, you need to look into this, that, and the third. I go get this, that, and the third. I look into it and I found out that I'm wrong. I would give that person credit. I would say, I remember somebody told me this, and I used to believe this, but they told me this, and that's what led me to this book, and this book. Or this source, or that source. And then I could say, okay, can it still be the other way? Possibly. But now more of the evidence that I had questions on, because you should always have questions about what you read. If you read something and agree with everything on there, you just finding something to agree with.
That might be a bias confirmation, right?
Yeah. So you need to find at least one thing in there that doesn't make sense to you. And you can do that.
I thank the skeptics. Because it's the skeptics saying, it's like, well, what's with that? That doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, he's kind of right. It doesn't make any sense, but let's figure out why it makes sense.
Yeah,
One of the critiques are the joints, and the joints, the elbows and the knees seem, again, more like a parallel to a frog than a human. So if you're looking at the joints saying that doesn't make sense to humans, well, you're right.
Yeah, not modern humans, because you're looking at humans as of today. But could it made sense to the Australopithecus afarensis or Australopithecus rummidus, the two species that they say that started a bilateral walking for human species? That's what I'm telling you. That's what, and that's like 3-4 million years ago. And this is what people say. So you go and you're talking hundreds of millions of years ago. You're not talking 3-4 million years ago. You're not talking 6-7 million years ago. You're not talking about 9-10 millions of years ago. You're talking hundreds of millions of years ago. And they say that the oldest, and I could be wrong, but they say that because the new updated information, they said that trilobites are actually the oldest species on this planet, where they started in the water. I think it's like 400 million years ago, or 400, I can't remember, 400 million years ago. I want to say it's something like that, or longer than that. But they came from the water, basically.
Yeah.
And just think about how the transition from evolution, like a lot of people talk about evolution. You know, you mentioned the word evolution, and it struck me kind of curious. I've read all of Darwin's books, all of the ones that he has available to the general public.
Mm.
I also know that when he wrote one version, he wrote a revised version later on, and he revised his work multiple times because he learned something new. So when people say Darwin said this wrong, I'm gonna say, which book did he say that in? Was that the first version or was that the revised version? Because yeah, he
Yeah,
might have
and that
said
might
that.
happen with some of my research too, especially as I'm trying to figure out the reproductive system. I could be far off on that, and what I'll do is I'll do damage control and I'll revise my theories. Right?
Yeah,
What do you see
and
here?
it looks well. I just recently just saw the Anaconda uh, film, and that kind of looked like an anaconda face in the front, but I also could see like some kind of look like some kind of human like depictions in the front. It looked like
So, do you
Cambodian
see a
style or
greater
something.
face? You're saying?
Yeah, I see a greater face that look like a reptilian like.
Well, congratulations, because most people don't see that. So
Yeah.
I partially attribute to that to we looked at a lot of faces already, biological faces. So congratulations. I've showed this to some people and they're like, what are you talking about? All I see is that human. Why? There's a human in the center.
No,
What
I
are you
seen
talking
that.
about?
Yeah, but I
So
remember
yes,
you and then I see the eyes that has the little slits in there that can depict
so
almost
we
like
have some
reptilian
eyes
like.
here and what looks like a mouth. In fact, even the image of where the man is could be alluding to a life from the mouth myth. And this is the great turtle in Central America. Definitely a very cool piece that I suggest is in
I was gonna
fact,
say
yes,
Cambodia area.
a tridactyl. Oh, isn't that interesting? So you picked up on some South. Yeah, I see it too. I know what you're saying. There's this Southeast Asian influence. So what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
Oceania. Here we have some, again, heart-shaped faces. You know, some of these had fangs that I originally dismissed as just artistic liberties, but it turns out they might actually very well
What?
have
Well,
some
let me ask you:
fangs.
were these species in like type of trees?
Um, I don't get a lot of, besides maybe just, myths that sort of peripheral fairy type myths, those
Yeah.
sort of things. They probably could climb trees. I wouldn't doubt it. I think, mostly they were designed for subterranean and aquatic lifestyles before
Mm.
evolving into different terms. So we have some oceanic imagery here. These splash guards are said to be ancestral beings.
Yeah, they're like a shark's tooth almost. If you just take a quick glance.
Well, that's funny you say shark tooth. It's even I suggested, well, why were sharks in Florida? We find lots of shark's teeth. Like, why is that? Was it a form of currency? Was it because the shark's tooth sort of looks like this, again, a serpentine being with a wide head?
Mm.
Here we go. Some more petroglyphs with three-figure
Yep.
beings. We have what looks like possibly even one of the chest implants that the beings have. Look at how I've almost realistic looking this one looks here. A sort of cartoon image of what could be. And look at
It's
the
a
data on
green. Is
that.
that green?
It's like a gray, it looks like.
Okay.
There's a red one. So this too should say to people, well, you could say, well, the bodies were designed to look like that. But we have to get past that. I am long past that those are dolls. I'm long past that they are cadavers that are glued together with, again, the skeptics won't offer you how this is done. They'll just say, well, the bones were removed and they were inserted. Well, how and why don't we see that? And they don't have a tail. All right, awesome. This is really one of the slides I wanted to get to. So we talked about the possibility of them being hundreds and hundreds of millions of years old. Well, if you go through the different cultures, and so here's that mother goddess one from the Caribbean we saw earlier. Now you can see that there is a child. Oh, you can't see. Let's move it over. Oh, it's interesting. I'm able to, I guess, manipulate the slide from my own. Okay, let's go back now. One more time. You having fun?
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
So there's this Caribbean Taino, I believe it is, artifact.
Taino, I know about that. I know about that. The god Yaya.
What's Guayaya?
God Yaya. God is the Yaya is the god's name. The
Yeah.
yeah,
Which, if you hear, it has the ya in it, right? So that could have some deeper meaning to it. But it has a child here in the chest area, which we might see in others. And so it's suggested by archaeologists that this is a mother goddess. Meanwhile, the Maori have this three-fingered, heart-shaped being that they call an ancestral being. On Easter Island, we have this face here in a cave, suggested to be a creator being. And then we have these fertility eye idols, which look like little gingerbread ETs that have been suggested to be fertility beings. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that the ancients considered heart-shaped beings with three fingers as mother goddesses, ancestral beings, creator beings, fertility beings across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go to that book and see what the heart means now. See, this is why I love having these discussions, because I'm telling you, I have a big old book on it. And it's just interesting that I need to look it up to see what what it says in there about the heart, because you take pieces and puzzles from everywhere. There's nobody on this planet that can read every single book. There's not anybody on this planet that can read every single peer-reviewed article or every single.
And that's the glory of AI right now. It has been super. Yeah,
that's the other thing, because if you ask AI the right question, hey, give me the source for this, give me a peer-reviewed article for this, if it doesn't give you one, then there's obviously you're going to either have to do one or two things: either chalk it up that there's nothing there, or dig deeper and see if you can find something. Because it's a lot of people don't understand that technology is so helpful today that they don't understand that if you know how to ask it the right questions and ask it for a source, that you can go and read after that, because you don't have to read so many books as much as
Wikipedia. People dismiss Wikipedia, and I used to tell my students, I used to teach history for a private school with like children who are sort of on the edge, either it was learning disabilities or English as a first language or even criminal backgrounds. I would tell them, they're like, well, we're not allowed to use Wikipedia in the other schools. I said, go to the sources. Wikipedia posts the sources right there. So you don't even have to tell anybody you went to Wikipedia. You just copy and paste the source, man.
I tell people that all the time. I said, okay, you got it from Wikipedia. Did you check the source? They say, yeah, I checked Wikipedia. But did you check the source that's underneath? Because usually when you go on Wikipedia, they'll have the number right next to the place that they say something at, and all you got to do is click on that number. It takes you down to the bottom of the page.
Now you're not using Wikipedia. Now you're using
you can go straight
whatever the source
straight to the source. It tells you straight to the source. A lot of people, I grew up on Wikipedia too when it came out and all that stuff. People say you can't use Wikipedia, but I said, but they give you sources.
Yeah.
I said you don't use it in the sense of writing your whole dissertation on it, but I mean, it gives you sources to go to read for something. I mean,
and I had posted something from AI, and Jeremy Corbell is like, "Oh, so you used AI?" And my question was, I'm like, "You mean you didn't even bother to do the least you could do and use AI?" That's the way I looked at it. You didn't even do the minimum of using AI, if you will.
Yeah, I think all that stuff work hand in hand, because a lot of people don't understand that this technology is so much easier to do research. I grew up in the days where there was no ChatGPT. Yo, do you know what ChatGPT was back in the days? Going to the library and going to them damn index cards and looking through each one of those index cards,
even before computers. Yeah,
and then if you had a bias,
I hated that. I was so glad when computers came out, because I hated index cards for whatever reason.
That's what made me hate reading. Really, is looking you spend all that damn time looking for the index card.
AI and the Tridactyls almost emerged together. At least for me, they did. So it's been very useful. I wouldn't be able to put together all this medical information without
not that fast,
right?
Yeah.
How about these three together? These are probably three of my favorite artifacts across cultures, across times. The Dogu of the
Yeah, the
Jomon people, the Ainu.
yeah, from Japan. Yep, I was going to bring them up. That's what I was saying. And then the eye idol one that you talked about from Mesopotamia is 3800 BC, Syria. Yeah, I'm telling you, that's the.
And by the way, the carbon dating on the big hands kind of go closer with that eye idol, or maybe even the Dogu. They go way back. It's just more of the eye idols. I love them. I think they're very playful. It also seems to say to me that some of this art indicates that somebody was a firsthand witness of these beings.
Yeah.
And even in these Permian, so this is a European, Eurasian cultural trait. It's almost as though they captured these beings in family units in sort of like candid shots of them caught in life.
Yeah, it's the pictures, and it's the Kodak pictures of today. That's all it is. They didn't have the ability to carry pictures, but pictures, back then is that artwork. They seen it, they depicted it. And this is what people don't understand when I say they seen stuff. When you read the Bible, the Ezekiel's will was done in a vision. When you look up the etymology definition of vision, it literally is of the imagination. Nothing with your two eyes, but something that's within their imagination. Some people consider that the third eye, meditative state, so on and so forth. But then also Jacob's ladder with the angels coming up and down the ladder. That was also done in a vision type state. When things were seen with the two eyes, it usually had to do with a fire. Moses seeing God in a fire, lights leading the Israelites, so on and so forth. This is depicted in all our history through paintings and so on and so forth, during that time, especially with, Leonardo da Vinci and all these other individuals and stuff like that.
I also allude to something called believing is seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, when I hear that, believing is seeing is, it's almost like, okay, I want to see it though. And you go looking for it and you find it. And nobody can tell you anything different. It's like when you see these heart-shaped faces, right? You've seen it in one place. Now you're seeing it over here, and you're seeing it over there, and you're like, wait a minute, these are thousands of miles apart. And then you're like, wait, I'm seeing it here. And then you're like, then you see it here, and then it has a little bit of mythology in it. So now you got to go to all the other back places that you've seen it at, and now you got to look at the mythologies about that. Because there's a mythology behind these. In Mesopotamia, these were sometimes considered the intelligent individuals. These were sometimes in some of the African traditions, they're the pygmy people, the fairies, the leprechauns, the ones that went to Ireland and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, across the board, we've mentioned there's just so many names. We have so many myths of the little people, and now we've found little people. I mean, again, I think this cultural complex right here is really significant. For one, people rarely talk about any sort of European influence on these sort of beings. We're always looking into Peru and whatnot. So here's a Eurasian culture from near Russia, and perhaps even hyper realistic. So if this is a European culture, is this the fairy folk, if you will, right?
Because and that's what I'm saying. These were intelligent individuals. Intelligent, but the intelligence was for their time frame. It wasn't how can I say, we can't use our intelligence, just like we can't use 2026 intelligence to 1990s. Our intelligence from just that time frame.
God, we've changed so much, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So
9/11.
Use it. Exactly.
So
and then you
check these out. Oh, go ahead. I don't want to cut you
off.
off.
I was just going to say that's part of it. We can't compare what we can do now versus what we did back then. And I like the Ganesh one. That one's a very fascinating story with the India and the child and stuff.
Yeah, who knows what knowledge was lost as well over time, right?
Yeah.
So these are just some clues, again, why I thought the metamorphosis was a thing. We have the Magatama related to those Ainu culture.
Yep.
The pig dragon of Chinese. And that's actually the head of Ganesh.
Yep.
But to me, when I saw it, I said, that looks like a being looking upwards towards the heavens with arms outstretched.
You know what else it looks like? Oh man, what was that movie? Oh, I just slipped the top of my head. I have to get back to you on that movie.
And then on the right here is what are supposed to be depictions of the supposed Naga people of Hinduism. And someone said, "Well, aren't those just snakes?" And I said, "With noses?" Right? So I thought this was almost a hyper realistic depiction of the tridactyl faces. Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see it. You know what I was looking at the most? The if you go to the third one, the chest area where you was talking about the chest with the ribs. That's what I was looking at when you was talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe even in the neck, right? We might see something that alludes to these beings with extended. Actually, the necks, they say, can the necks retract? Likely they could extend through a hydrostatics or something like maybe a cephalopod or a squid type of. Let's see what else we got.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. So the genetic disc was long thought to be fake, but on closer examination, it appears to show tridactyl metamorphosis. In fact, I even put one of my larva discoveries, and again, you can see the sort of unicarpal. You might be able to see the fused tail, fused feet, I should say, the tail. You might even be able to see the spinal column reflective. And then this piece from this tadpole-like piece from the disc almost resembles it point for point. So definitely look into the genetic disc. I was thinking of calling them Naga Tridactyls would be a good name if we had to choose a scientific nomenclature. So this is getting into more of my cultural assertions that we've talked about throughout the show today. And that is that our symbolic language is inspired by the Tridactyls. One of the oldest symbols for God or heaven are these strange little beings. Is that incredible?
Yeah. Yeah. That symbolism there is crazy because, like I said, when you look at the hands, you could tell that has to do. It just depends on the culture, but most of the time, if it's down, it's usually a male, and then if it's up, it's usually a female. But it has to do with heaven. It has to do with religion in a sense. And then when you look at the one with the nose, the one on the right, let's see, what's it called? The steganographic concealment hypothesis, where the Buddhist temple, Egyptian world. Yeah, if you look at that right there, you can see that all around the world too, where they have structures and monuments that look exactly like that.
Yeah, so the beauty of the Tridactyls was not just looking at the bodies or even just looking at, cordiform faces. It was that it appears as though that these beings were an impetus to our symbolic language. I also suggest that the beings later on, as time progressed, were hidden in art. So I call that steganography. And then I've even alluded to a Naga morpheme with the sound being of some importance to human culture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's the symbolism. The ram. Oh, wow. The ram. Now you get into more mythology. Okay.
So I'm suggesting that this ram is actually a steganographic depiction of a tridactyl. And when you look at what should be its eyes, a close-up of it has the cross-hatching pattern in the eyes. And it has the smaller human-like being in the chest area, like a mother goddess imagery of the Taino, which I guess maybe I can go back to my full screen so you can have a being within the chest of the Taino mother goddess. So yeah, this is just an example of what I suggest is steganography. So while you do see a ram, I suggest those ears are actually playing the role of eyes in this case. And
almost like how with the dollar bill or the $20 bill, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some
like
questionable symbolism there. This might be an image for your viewers where if you squint your eyes, or if you close your eyes and then open them slowly, if you squint, you may get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So while this is supposedly a Buddhist tree of life, I suggest it is actually a concealed tridactyl face within.
Yeah, I can see it. I'm doing the squinting right now.
Yeah. And you may even see, I've realized too that maybe the eyes even may change. There may be different faces even within this that you might be able to depict.
Flip it upside down and try it.
So I do that sometimes too. Yeah. So you have to wonder, why would something like the Tree of Life be concealing a tridactyl face?
The
So
third
here's
eye.
another one. This I got actually from Praveen Mohan's videos. This is a Yaksha god, little being. And I think part of it is I call it the arms is face motif. And I suggest hidden within that very face is a hyper realistic tridactyl face.
All right.
Let me just go back to the slideshow here. And here's more of these. I suggest the arms is face motif in a European Vinci culture, Egyptian pieces.
Yeah, that's interesting. I gotta say, like, it's just, what do people need for evidence?
Oh, I know.
You know,
you could still say this is subjective, but again, we have the bodies. And even looking at, again, the one that was in the Indian statue, it's more than just, I think it's more than coincidence. We can see the supraorbital arches. We can see the rostrum face. The elbows even appear to make the temporal bones of the tridactyl skull. So to me, I call this steganography. It's concealed imagery. And I think it's even been the case that our eye idols may have evolved into something a little more iconic. You like the Anunnaki, so that is a depiction of Anu or An.
Yeah, right, you haven't, you speaking my language.
So notice how this is the same, relatively the same region. It's as though this piece here later evolved into something more iconic. So I find that that's what happens a lot in human culture. It's either going to become more stylized, that we just recognize it as a symbol, or it becomes more anthropomorphic and we recognize it as dwarves, fairies, little people.
But that's just a title. That's a title. That's not, I mean, you could call it dwarves, fairies, whatever you want to call it. That's just a title.
Right, I mean, but even the depiction ends up becoming more human, right? They're like little people.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's part of our egotistic trait, is that we want everything to be human. That's why everything is turned into a human. Like, that's why if it doesn't look like us, it's not human.
That's a great point, right? Which is why, like, the gods are always depicted as humans, and I'm saying those god stories might not even be our own. Those belong to almost a different people. And then look, I even suggest that the iconography ends up in our own capital pillars, our own ionic columns, which, by the way, has those symbols are called eggs, and those volute spirals are called eyes.
Yeah, see, a lot of people don't understand it. They think that's just, art to make it for aesthetic pleasing individuals, and it's not. It's symbolism. It's telling you a story. When I was a
kid, I was looking at a pattern of like floors, maybe it was, or a bunch of different shapes, and I said, "Mom, I see faces in that." She's like, "Oh, that's just the design." So my own mother, once again, she said Bigfoot was fake and that was just a design. And I no longer believe anything is just a design. Nothing is coincidence. And I think the most dramatic find I found was at the Pillars of Hathor, where perspective anamorphosis plays a part, where if you stand at the perfect angle, at the perfect distance, the two faces of the goddess actually form one singular tridactyl face.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the more dramatic ones.
Yeah, like I said, I'll say it over and over again. I don't understand what people's problem is with these facts. I mean, you have the evidence. Nothing is coincidence. I don't think any. I mean, nothing's new under the sun. I mean, we've been told that. I've been told that my whole life. Nothing's new under the sun. We just, and I feel like human intelligence IQ is just based on patterns. We
Pattern recognition, right?
Yeah. So it's not hard to understand that, evolution is going to take its place, isn't it? I mean, we may go back to that type of species if the climate in the world changes. People don't understand is that
that's
our
what we're
oxygen
exactly. We are wired for that. We can adapt, right? Any of these species can adapt, and since my theory is, all of these traits are within us, which is interesting because the Tridactyls may allow us to perhaps create some way to breathe underwater or regenerate or.
When you was talking about that earlier, I can't remember. There's a group of individuals on this planet that can stay underwater, almost
in the Celebes Sea. So when people talk about Atlantis, I say you should look to the Celebes Sea, which is it is surrounded by land, and you have to find it looks like a way to get into the Celebes Sea, and that's where these people literally live in the ocean and are able to dive great distances. So this is the cornucopia. The cornucopia, I started noticing that these gods were holding these cornucopias almost like they were living things. And I was like, what's with that? And the farther you go back in time in the cornucopia, it seems to become more and more serpentine. So eventually, this is a cornucopia here, which looks like it's just a clutched serpentine being next to the god.
Yeah, that's exact. Now, if you look at the Ubadians, I bring it up. Remember that picture? That's how it almost looks on the Ubadians. If you haven't seen them, that's exactly how it almost looks like. Here, I'll bring it up real quick so you
sure.
can see it. But it's crazy about the similarities, and that's why I say a lot of people talk about the Sumerians, but the Ubadians, they literally have depiction of these what would look like that almost. So here I'm gonna.
Look at those gods holding those beings, those serpentine beings. Their heads are erect, and it's dismissed as a cornucopia, which the cornucopia is the horn of knowledge that fed Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
So even at that stage, it alludes to a ram that raised Zeus. And it's funny too. The cornucopia is in modern myth with the whole fruit of the loom conspiracy. So when I hear people talk the fruit of the loom conspiracy, I'm almost inclined to believe, well, maybe there's something there.
It's crazy. I'm telling you. So here's one of the websites. I'm gonna bring it up for you real quick so you can see it. Here's one of the websites that I was telling you about that shows like the Ubadian arts and stuff like that. Here, let me make it bigger.
Oh yeah, those are classic, aren't they?
Yeah.
The Tridactyls also have those wide shoulders. The Tridactyls also have skin scoots on them that those statues allude to.
And these are like the elongated heads.
Very nice.
So that's why I was telling you, those
don't look like they were bound either. Those look like they could be natural.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of information that's out there, because you can also see where the Jesus-like figure, where it's holding a baby near the breast, and you can see it right here too. And then you can see like the cross and stuff like that. Like
also the closed eyes, the slit eyes is definitely a Tridactyl clue.
Yep. And the waist is the torso area is very thin. That would look like or depict somewhat of what you would say.
Look at those shoulders compared to the Dogu we were just looking at, and also again the allusion to some sort of skin scoots are on them, which you can see on the skin yourself. They're there.
Like right here, right?
So essentially, yeah, that's right. Essentially, what I'm suggesting is those are depictions of Tridactyls. Now, are they a first-person witness? Maybe. If they're not, there may be a second generation. That's something archaeologists have always done, is sort of try to guess, if you see a depiction of an animal, how familiar were they with that animal? So this could be a first generation or at least a second generation witness to these beings, in my opinion.
You know, like look at the torso area, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why I say. And then look, look at the bottom of the feet. Why did they stop like that?
Yeah, almost looks like they're fused too, right?
Yeah. So you know, it's just amazing to me that you see the little evidence right here and stuff like that. It's just amazing to me that you see this stuff, and this is before the Sumerians. Okay, this is before the Akkadians. This is before the Anuna, the Anunnaki. This is before all of them. This is the Ubadians that inhabit the land of Sumer before the Sumerians, because we get the word Sumer from the Sumerians. And these are the reptilian rights.
And I've been working on my own sort of folk etymology myself, because as I alluded to, there's I call it the Naga morpheme, the ung sound, I suggest is a clue that could help us. You know, everyone's looking for an ancient civilization in artifacts or structures. What if it's in sounds and language?
And you know, I've actually done a lot of discussions with a lot of people that frequency plays a big part of it too.
You have,
but you know,
Flint Dibble up there.
Oh yeah. so I tell you about that. So George Howard, he's the owner of Cosmic Summit. So I went to Cosmic. You laughing? I went to Cosmic Summit last year. And you know, everybody gets on a Flint Dibble and stuff like that, whatever. But it was the after party, like when you first got there the first day. It was like a little after party they had.
Sure. Yeah, I just got back from Quest for Ancient Civilizations.
Somebody was handing those masks out. So they're masks.
Oh, God. Was it? It wasn't. What's his name? Oh, God, I
can't remember.
It wasn't the beard gentleman, was it? Big beard, long hair. I don't know why his name is escaping me. I
can't remember.
I shared drinks with him. Okay, so that's where it gets a little. It starts to look a little bit like bullying to me on a mass scale.
The only reason why I got it is because I think you know, Flint Dibble, he might, whatever he says, but I think everybody that goes after him, they just throw those shots at him.
Yeah, and it became a little bit of dogpiling, so I was kind of like, you guys got to chill. I mean, when I went for Quest for Ancient Civilization, you know, I thought I was going to get attacked by the mob because they were so against archaeology. So there's two things in the Flint Dibble thing. I you know, as a fellow archaeologist, I want to defend him a little bit. I also want to defend him a little bit because of the bullying became a little bit too much, I think. That's one thing. And remember when I told you that I like Jerry Springer. See, I don't get bullied. There was a time when you know, I took all kinds of different martial arts, karate, boxing, you know, taekwondo. I took mixed martial arts. What's your favorite?
Jiu-jitsu. I took that or military combatives, because military combatives takes a lot of that. I was in the military, so I took military combatives all the way up to level 3, and I'm that guy.
Is what you're saying?
I'm that kind of person. Well, no, not really. I'm just that type of person that I stick up for the smaller people. Mostly, you know, when you see somebody going through something, everybody will start looking, but they won't jump in. So I would jump in and defend that person, whether I like them or not. If you're doing something if you're not going to go at that person hard, if you're not going to stand up to that man face to face and don't say nothing to them to their face, you know, I'm a firm believer. I wish we could go back to the dueling days, not necessarily taking guns out and drawing it, but dueling days where I would see you at sundown and we'll have a fist fight type thing. Yeah. Because it got to the point where a lot of people just talk online, talk so negative to each other, that it gets to the point where, are you really trying to bully me? Because do you really know who I am? Right? Like, are you bullying me?
Or do you really want to escalate this intellectual debate into a physical encounter?
Yeah.
And it's
and to be honest with you, I am that type of person that, because I have PTSD and I was in the military and I was wounded in combat, my brain the circuits don't work correctly. So that's my excuse to get rowdy sometimes. But I don't I don't get rowdy for myself. I get rowdy for others also. Like, I don't like it when people are picking on other people.
I'm the same way, Sometimes people think I get mad because, like, maybe you're bullying me, but a lot of times I'm like, holy shit, you must do this to people all the time, So we're gonna have to end it here with me, right?
Yeah, that's my point. You've been doing it for so long that you finally found the right one that has time. So now, which way do you want it to go? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can wrestle pigs if people want to put pig wrestle, but
you know what I'm saying?
We should try to keep it pleasant. Let's keep it pleasant. Let's keep it intellectual. I used to run security at the largest nightclub in South Florida. So, every night was fight night. In fact, we even had mixed martial arts nights, which you can imagine. We did live martial arts in the club. Can you imagine the testosterone and aggression that was in that club? Needless to say, I kept busy.
I can up you on that. So when I was in Iraq in 2000,
you just upped me there.
Shit, I can't even remember. 2005, 2006. I was in this place that was called Khao-Su. So it's called the Triangle of Death in Iraq. So it's like somebody every day. So I don't even have to speak on that, right? But every Friday, our post commander and sergeant major hosted a fight night. So you can have a boxing night. So if you had any trouble with anybody on post, it doesn't matter if it was a private to lieutenant colonel, or a full bird colonel, you call them out, and if they want to, you can settle it there. If not, then leave it at that. But at the bare minimum, everybody got to call out whoever they wanted to. So, and this was at one time it was an all male base until women started coming in, when we started being able to secure it more because of the fact that it was wide open at one time. And you just think about all the male testosterone that was in there, in Iraq,
a war zone.
My
God, the energy that must have went into the combat alone must have been.
So I grew up in that stuff. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I went into the military. I was in combat. I was in Afghanistan and Iraq more than I was in the States my first 10 years. So I'm that type of person where my circuits in my brain doesn't work too well. And what I mean by that is that I'm not saying that I just go off. I don't let anybody push me around, and I won't watch somebody else push somebody.
Yeah, and I have something similar. It's the fight or flight thing. It's like, you don't want to scare me. Because if you scare me, you know what I mean? And then we're tapping into something primal now, Yeah.
And when you mentioned earlier about that, this is a fight that you're trying to get to, it almost feels like that. It almost gets to that point where, and I'm 42 years old, so I'm getting older and wiser and much more calmer and stuff like that. There's a lot of reasons for that, of course, but. When I was in my younger day, even just last year, I noticed that I was getting into it a lot with a lot of people. And then this year I told myself, and it was mostly because I was trying to promote who I was. I mean, my book went bestseller, and I don't have advertisements to that. I didn't have money there. All I could do was just go in there and just communicate with people, whether it was arguing with people or having a legitimate conversation. I had to promote myself any way I possibly could. I got my book out there, it went bestseller. I did what I needed to do. But the fight didn't stop there, because there are still people who believe certain things that I know for a fact that is not true. And it's only because they told me a source that they said that it was in, I got that source and found out they created a narrative. What I like about you is that you don't create a narrative. You're giving people a source and you're saying, hey, look, this is what it could mean. I'm going to use also my background, my credentials, which you have as your credentials. You use your credentials and you use every other, and you try to find others to help you that can further better your education on the subject too.
Yes.
And I think that's what's missing in a lot of these fields, is that people get emotional too fast. I can talk to anybody, whether I like you or not. If you want to have a real conversation, we can talk. Everything that we have between us after that, We can leave that to the side. I don't care about that. But if you really want to know the truth, and I really want to know the truth, we can have a simple discussion, and that'll be the end of it. Or we can have many discussions, and it'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people are trying to put on a show because they want to create a narrative. So for their monetizations, for the money, and so on and so forth. When I first started,
yeah, maybe.
No, I honestly believe that, because when you read some of the stuff that's written in these comments and these posts and stuff like that, it's the most emotional baiting type thing. It's almost like there's a lot of these people almost remind, they'll use that to get to whatever it is they can get people talking on. I don't think there's no mystery in any of what you're sharing. I think the mystery is, why is this? Why do we have them all the way around here? And what were their what did they do here on this planet? What was their culture all the way like? And you share some of it, because you got all the temples. We talked about the Ubadians. I mean, this.
Yeah, here's the Bayon temple, which even on the screen here, which a lot of people will see the faces on the left and the right, the human faces when they go to the temple. And I suggest that, again, those two faces, like my Temple of Hathor, the two faces are helping to create one singular face.
Now, look, you said Cambodia. Now, did you know that there are depictions in Cambodia, and I'm pretty sure you probably know this, that there are human-like species that are riding what could look like dinosaurs?
Yeah, and I've gone back on that myself, and I suggest, are what we seeing dinosaurs really just one of the Tridactyl metamorphic stages?
Or were they riding dinosaurs back then? Maybe. Or a type of a dinosaur? There's different species. You said, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, dinosaur has its own sort of weight that it carries. So, I mean, it could still be, a large reptile or some sort of even mammal, a strange mammal for all I know. I mean, even the Tridactyls, they seem to have traits that, again, I call it a Genesis taxon for a reason. They seem to have traits that are beyond the traditional clades of organization of animals.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I'm gonna start looking into this more often, because
I'll bet.
That book. It's the symbolism. It's all symbolism. When they're depicting these things, they're using symbolism to depict them.
So, I thought that the beings may have had ovoviviparity or gastric or mouth brooding like amphibians. That is, they may have carried their young in their mouths, because there's so many motifs in the world of life from the mouth, born of the mouth. Mm-hmm. This one here in British Columbia is four-limb first being with a cordiform supraorbital arches. And then in Paracas, we have serpentine shapes coming from the mouth.
They look like a cobra. They look like a cobra or something.
Sure. This one, I don't know what to do with this motif. I haven't studied it too much. I originally thought that perhaps Sebastian's implant was part of this. So this is one of these things where I'm going to have to update this. My intel has changed. I now believe that implant is related to the larva extraction, because looking on the scans, directly behind that scan, behind that metal implant, is larval forms, and the interior of that implant bears boring marks like you might find from a termite or something. So the Tridactyl larvae, using their sharp rostrum beaks, were gnawing at the interior of that metal implant. Another motif, the seated god that I see in Victoria. Now, this one here is a little Photoshop. I did add one of the heads that I believe could be Victoria's head to it. So Victoria is the famous seated Tridactyl, the only one of its kind. I suggest Victoria might be the most important individual in the history of planet Earth.
That's the one that I said that I remember looking at, that was saying that they could walk on two legs because of the hip placement on it.
Yeah, they definitely could walk on two legs, and I wonder some of that might just be the depiction of how they were presented, perhaps. The bodies may have been presented. But it's interesting because we have depictions of the being with its head. So is this a motif of a seated god going around the world? Is this part of our tutelary beings?
Fingerprints of the gods.
Yeah, so that's an actual fingerprint of the Tridactyl, which people suggest is very unique because it doesn't show whorls. And I'm saying here, look at this structure. That's a cave structure, which looks a little dark on your screen. I don't know if your viewers are going to see that. But they can always go. That's actually a cave, which seems to almost replicate that Tridactyl fingerprints. I'm just trying to get through some of this cultural stuff here. The cross-hatching I mentioned earlier. So this is the actual skin. And then this is ceramics that we can find in the Americas. It's almost indiscernible, one from the other. I suggest we may actually have ceramics in the Americas where they took the Tridactyl skin and pressed it. Because even in Florida archaeology, we suggest that some sort of fabric may have been used to have been pressed into the clay to leave the image. Was that supposed fabric the Tridactyl skin? Just showing you some of the symbols around the world, showing serpentine beings, tridactyl beings, cordiform or triangular heads. Some modern symbols, which I suggest could be very much a part of the Tridactyl symbolism, from the Buddha, what else do we call these? Paisleys. The floor is actually, seems to be a mother goddess imagery. So if you notice, it sort of replicates itself. Now people say, oh, it's a flower. But what does the flower represent? The flower actually represents a river goddess.
Yep. Because of the water, the flow of water, yeah.
You know, some of the earliest places where Homo sapiens were detected was in Tibet and the Ainu Islands of the Choman people. So this here was a volcano that erupted approximately 70,000 years ago. Is that part of what may have spawned a mass migration? Here's me tracing this symbol, which I also relate to a sound called ka. And so we talked about Sumer, and I suggest that, you know, like you said, is Sumer really the first place, or is Sumer just the first, you know, developed place? Where did civilization actually originate from? So this is my attempt to trace a symbol and trace a sound at the same time. This is me tracing the symbol, which I suggest leaves us from the Nagas in Central Eurasia, heads west and related to water sounds, water lake sounds as ang, and may even come to Indo-European culture as anguilla for eels and perhaps even angels. So
that's
various
interesting
sounds.
right there.
I suggest that Mega Lake Gobi may be the origins of our. This is all spawned from the Tridactyls, as ridiculous as that it sounds. So now I've just gone into all these different theories just because the Tridactyls have allowed me to rethink things. And basically, you know, I mentioned a serpentine mother goddess myth, essentially a water serpent mother goddess myth. I traced that back to Central Eurasia, to the Himalayan plateau, related to the Naga and related to dragons. So I suggest Mega Lake Gobi may have been paramount in creating our flood myth, our Eden myth, our Tower of Babel myth. We look at homelands of language, and if you trace back the homeland of language, which it seems like languages at one point were spreading out about 1 mile, I want to say 1 mile a year, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And while Oceanic people and Native American people, 2 miles a year, is that right? Yeah, 2 miles a year, which allude to the Oceanic people, of course, are in boats. So it kind of supports the idea that Native Americans, if their language is spreading equally to the Oceanic people as opposed to the mainland people, well, then it suggests that the Bering Strait probably wasn't the deal. It was probably an aquatic travel. So what I did was I was able to sort of come up with a central point for these languages. And to me, it appears as though the languages are radiating outwards, just like the serpent myths from this region.
Okay. Makes sense to me. I mean, not. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it's two things can be right at once. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that would say, well, this is the only way it could have happened. No, that is not the only way anything happens. There has to be multiple things, because the possibility of that not being successful doing it one way is very slim. You know, so there's multiple different ways in.
And I think we have to look at even modern history in a different way, because a lot of these agricultural plants are attributed to the Portuguese. Oh, the Portuguese spread these around. The Portuguese spread the bananas around. And I'm suggesting that, you know, we talk about the breadbasket and the Levant, but what about this yam culture? You know, yams are traced back to a singular, they say they're separate species, but they can be traced back to a singular mother species. So look at this sort of yam belt here. I think this might be of some importance to tracing again, people want to trace a world culture. At the very least, I'm putting out there that there's more questions to be asked.
Oh yeah,
here's another great find that just came from the Tridactyls. How strange is this? That the Sphinx of Giza and the Lion's Rock of Sri Lanka both seem to cross coordinate on Mount Kailash, one of the most important mountains in the world.
Yeah, you could tell you did your due diligence.
They're just degrees apart. Is that just coincidence?
Like I said, nothing's new under the sun.
And that Sri Lanka rock, it looks like it even has three-fingered paws. The rock itself appears to be almost tridactyl-like. It even has a pool of water at the top, which could be associated with what I call the kappa, which is really a fontanelle of like you might find in a child. This was the clue that I suggested, that this would have the third eye, and that was a guess, mind you. And then later on, looking at the scans, sure enough, that's where I discovered the parietal pineal complex.
Yeah, you can definitely tell you did your due diligence.
Yeah, why do you say that?
Because you have your evidence, you have your slides,
and it's a wide variety of evidence that's just ever expanding, right?
And you're explaining it like you're keeping it very simple. You know what I mean? One of the terms that I used in the military a lot was keep it simple, stupid. Tell me what you want me to do simply.
People do complex. Complicate is the word I'm looking for. So I thought another grand discovery was the rediscovery of a lost god. I thought that this term Ka was a God's word, God phoneme, partially based on this Sanskrit language with this shape over here, which seems to show a serpentine being with a cordiform head. And that letter is Ka. It is a primary letter. It is an alpha letter. So this was a hypothesis. But then when I discovered the Nilamata Purana, which is sort of a Kashmiri history book, mytho-historic, it says Brahma is the creator, Kubera is the creator, and Ka is the creator. And when I said that, I said, wow, I found my evidence. Excuse me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because the Ka in Egypt is basically the spiritual double. Is the spiritual double tied to the breath and vitality of a being. I have that right here on my screen because I was just reading a book on a PDF file that gives it out. But they also talk about the Ba also, which sometimes depending on the source, the Ba and the Ka could be different or be either or, just depending on some of the people. But the Ka is very fascinating in ancient Egypt history too, in the mythology and stuff like that. So.
And so if you start to look at these words across the world, you even see this here this is Mount Rushmore. This is the left side. Oh, you can't see it because of let me go back to full screen. This is the left side of Mount Rushmore. And I say they call that, I believe that's the official grandfather of these 6 grandfathers. So, you know, Mount Rushmore, you can look at it today, and well, we can call it pareidolia, but I think even to the ancients, pareidolia was of significant importance. If an ancient came across a rock that reminded them of the ancestors, well, then that rock became important, even if it was just natural. So look at this word here. It's got the Naga phoneme in the ung here, funkasila. And it has the ka phoneme in it. So we can start looking, I call it sort of a folk etymology. I think we can start to relook at words and come up with new meanings.
Yes, sir.
A couple more slides for you. So these are in Nagaland. They are actually Naga tribes. So neck extending, you might consider something like that in Africa. But here is a Southeast Asian culture, and the reason they do it is to emulate the dragon mother. These other tribes appear to be tattooing supraorbital arches on their faces and even temporal bones, cross-hatching, and furculas on their body. Some artist depictions. I think we're about to wrap it up. The constant companion theory, we are never alone, just showing you depictions from across the world. And then I have a conclusion here I'll read out. The Tridactyls of Nazca, Peru, represent primate, proto-amphibian hybrid beings that corroborate with the post-flood cosmological narratives of ancestral tutelary beings that taught man culture, civilization, and are best exemplified by Naga, dragons, and Asian belief. So for everyone out there, you can do your own virtual dig. We're not done hunting. There are artifacts in museums. There are lost myths and narratives that need to be reevaluated. And some of these artifacts are in private collections. So if you have access to someone who has a private collection, get in there and at least snap some pictures. And this just happened recently. We have Greer and one of the representatives looking at one of the giant hands of the Tridactyls. People have used this face in some memes because he looks so perplexed, like, what the hell is that? And so that's me. I used to work at the Graves Museum. That dinosaur is still on the building. I used to work alongside Bobby De Palma, who is a famed paleontological prodigy. You can see him on Attenborough's BBC. Unfortunately, he is not interested in helping me out with this, and he is skeptical. For further research, you can visit me, tridactyls.com, thealienproject.com, tridactyls.org, and even this wonderful site here, which is like the one I showed you where the guy combined all those pictures to put all the different depictions together. You can find their work at the Little Beings and Ant People link here. So thanks for letting me go through the whole cultural stuff. I'm sorry I kind of like ramrodded that in because I realize on almost every show I go on, it's always everyone wants to know about the biology, and it wasn't even my original intention wasn't to focus on the biology. My original intention was the cultural, but I had to dive into the biology because if you don't believe the biological assertions that these are real, then all this cultural stuff is just going to be subjective coincidence, right? And the myths is just going to be like, well, that's just myths.
No, that's my specialty is the myth. That's why I said that I found your stuff interesting because I watch your shows and I see your whole all your shows that were the ones that I've seen. I only think I've seen like 3 or 4 of them. They only talked about, you know, the scans, the DNA. Are they real? How can you tell that they're real and stuff like that? It was the same.
I realized I spend like an hour or 2 even on that because
yeah,
it's become important for sure. But it's like I realize I'm like, man, I'm not covering any of the cultural stuff. People are missing out on that. So I try to do like when I do like a live presentation, I always try to like I try to split it in half. You know, I try to focus on the biology, but we have to get to the cultural to demonstrate that not only were these beings real, but they were depicted all over the world. And I think it does sway some people. I do think so.
Yeah, no, definitely, no doubt. I'm serious. Like I'm into the mythologies and the cultures and the religion. The religions come from the mythologies. The mythologies comes from the traditional oral stories, and the traditional oral stories come from people talking to each other, trying to buy time or something like that, right? We're sitting by campfires, we're sitting there hunting, fishing, they're telling stories, whatever. But they use what's around.
Even those stories are all going to have a purpose, I suggest.
That's what I was going to say.
I think ultimately, like religion is just, it's repeating the past. I think our ancestors whether they were originally non-humans or hybrids, whatever it was, they wanted us to remember the past. They want us to remember the ancestors. They want us to know all of this stuff.
Yeah.
They
so you
want us
think they
to know,
came,
hey, these little guys were important to you.
so you think these individuals came from planet Earth? They didn't come from they're not extraterrestrial. They're
If they came from out of extraterrestrial, it's so long ago. Does it even matter? Almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, all their biologies, we can find parallels right here on Earth. Until something else comes out that it's like, wow, we don't have anything like that on Earth, which might be hard. You might be hard pressed to find. Then these are terrestrial beings. Yeah, I call them terrestrials.
No, I
using from Sumer. I call them terrestrials.
That I'm telling you, I'm really deep in the mythologies, and I'm telling you, the Ubadians, I think we need to study them more on the ideas of where these individuals came from, because I believe in extraterrestrials, I believe in aliens. Mathematically, scientifically, what they say, if there's billions of planets out there, obviously there's something else other than us out there. Okay, but what does the ancient text actually say and depict is what I go off of, not what I believe, but what that text says specifically for those groups of people. I know, like I always talk about the Sumerians, a lot of people take the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and all those individuals and say it was the Sumerians. No, each one of those people played their own part.
That's true. They're all individual cultures, right?
Yeah. So you have, to get the basic understanding of these cultures is understanding their symbolism. Symbolism, a lot of people don't really understand this. And I try to tell people that to understand language of today, you have to understand the symbolism of yesterday. Meaning that these people, when they wrote stuff down, if they drew something, it might have not been exactly what you would think when you see it. There's a lot of play into it, because you have to,
and it'll change over time.
Yeah, it will change over time, especially like how words change over time today. Etymology dictionary, like I talked about that earlier, you have a word that was in the 1900s that's different in 2026.
Well, it means even like totally different. Alpha seems to allude to the father, in my opinion. If I try to I call it folk etymology, because I'm really coming up with my own sort of, I've with the sound and ka. So you have Ka, which I suggest is the name of the patriarch of the Naga people. Mm-hmm. And in some cultures, you may hear a Ki for a female, or a Ku for a sun god, a descendant god. I found that if you combine these sounds together, you end up coming up with sounds and words that people might recognize. Like Ka and the sound, you'll get Kang or Khan.
Yeah.
And the alpha letter in, I want to say I don't know if it's Sumerian, to be honest, one of the ancient Mesopotamians, their alpha letter is good. Mm-hmm. And it looks like a triangle with a couple of horns, they suggest. And they'll call it the ox. But an ox is gelded. An ox does not have, and these beings do not have exterior genitalia, most of them. There is one exception.
Yep. So, I mean, like I said, I don't know what more anybody wants from the presentation. You got your history, you got your sources, you got the presentations, the DNA analysis, you got all this stuff. I don't know what more anybody else needs. At this point, it's just like you said, it's a chosen ignorance then at this point.
Yeah. And for myself, the biology is still going to be a continuous research. I just formulated that proboscis theory into something a little bit more concrete and sensible. The reproductive system is going to require obviously more development. But again, the myths alluded to parthenogenesis. The myths alluded to hermaphroditism. The myths alluded to amphibianism. So it was all there. And I was just able to reevaluate these things that we've looked at and maybe dismissed, and through a new eye of the biological evidence of the Tridactyls.
It's so funny. You mentioned hermaphrodite. You remember the Ubadian artifact that I showed you that was holding the baby next to the chest to the breast. A
Yeah.
lot of people have speculated that the Virgin Mary has been subjected in some kind of sense of a hermaphrodite of some sort. Yeah, because of the simple fact that she didn't have natural
Well,
relations.
since you opened that box, well, let's make it be a good thing to end with. Even there is a myth of Gun and Yu, and Gun is executed by the gods because he failed to use the expanding earth to stop the flood, and by using the expanding earth, he instead created more damage. He was executed, and I want to say, I think it was 3 years later, not 3 days later. 3 years later, his son Yu emerged.
Mm-hmm.
Yu also could possess a last name of a goddess, Je. So you would have Yu-Je, and you would have Gun, which could relate to God. I suggest Yu may actually be the Jesus myth, and that the Christian myths are again just reinterpretations of previous myths because the ancients didn't want us to forget. So by remembering the tale of Jesus and his mother, who's probably more important to the story than we realize because she's the parthenogenic goddess.
Yeah.
That's what I suggest. And that these beings may be, a deeper time origin. So Yu-Je might be Jesus or Yeshu.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, that's actually a perfect way to end it then. That's a very perfect way. Before I close it out, when I end the stream, don't go anywhere. I want to speak to you.
Okay.
After this,
well, live long and prosper to all your viewers. I suggest that this hand symbol is the symbol of the first letter of Shaddai, which is the feminine name of God. And really, if you're following the Arabic rules, it wouldn't be El Shaddai. If you're following Arabic or Semitic rules, it's actually Ash-Shaddai, like Asherah. So this represents the first letter of the mother goddess. And if you look at the Shaddai letter in Syriac, which is actually in the slideshow, the letter for that is a heart shape.
See, get in there. This was awesome. I'm telling you, I could tell you do your due diligence. You go in there.
This is what full-time study is allowed. I've been blessed to be able to do this full-time. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to, but I've been blessed to do this full-time, and I think it's only through full-time study and me continuously going at it that I've been able. Otherwise, if I was just doing this casually, which I think most of us do, I don't know if everything would have been discovered.
I'm gonna have to make a trip down to see you. I'm not far from you.
You're in Georgia, right?
Yep.
Sweet. Yep. We can meet halfway or St. Augustine or something.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm there too. Matter of fact, I was just there doing a video on a museum over there. I went to go to that fair that they had out there. Yeah, so yeah, I was just out there like a couple of weeks ago.
Love that town. I tell you, if I were to move anywhere in Florida, I would probably move there, and I would want to be as close to the historic district as possible.
Yeah, I'm going back there. I'm definitely going back there. But I do appreciate you coming on, everybody.
I appreciate you giving me the time and talking and the questions and the comments. So I thank you also.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to end the stream, and like I said, don't go anywhere. I appreciate everybody coming out. We had at least about 100 people watching us live, so a lot of people. We had a couple of comments in here. Brilliant presentation that was given to you.
Oh, that's nice.
That was watching us. So yeah, we definitely. And they did this right here. Once you
live long and prosper, very nice. Hope everybody's watching Starfleet Academy. As a lifelong Star Trek fan, it's awesome.
All right, everybody. Y'all take it easy. You have a good day.